Hello, 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 and welcome. Things are going broken or getting broken, and I don't know why. TV keeps switching off. It's like a TV I use for the second. It keeps switching itself off and on. Oh, hello, Ian. How are you doing? Hope you're welcome back to the stream. Hope you're doing okay. Um, yes. So, I think I've got everything set up. I'm ready to rock. Yeah. Okay. Right. Oh dear. So, I guess the first thing to mention is that I have picked up another cold. So when I went to the EGX thingy, I had a cold for that because lots and lots of people there. I managed to pick something up. That was quite a bad one. Had to take some time off work, but this one isn't so bad. But it means I'm not feeling 100%. So where I was thinking of that I would start the new series after doing this, this breakdown post-mortem run-through thing, I'll probably just end it there. It'll take a little while to go through because what I've done. Right, let's get this continuous running. So this is the the finished in quotes Megabase. Still running. I did fire it up during the week, mainly to do some. We'll come on to this, but mainly to sort of fiddle about and see what difference these made. I didn't save it, but yeah. So this is the Megabase running, all the way down at 30 UPS. And yeah, as I say, what I've done, I've made some notes. I say so if my so if my voice goes or I need to break to sneeze or whatever, that's why sort of thing. I'm not feeling as bad. Let's say if my voice is a bit weird and all that sort of stuff. That's all why. But yeah, so I made some notes. What I've done, I've noted down a few of the save files that I want to load up to kind of maybe try and illustrate some of the points. I don't know that I got the right ones because obviously there are 73 episodes, so there's 73 save files, just as the main ones, and then there's all the ones where I've been doing work during the week, between streams. So hopefully I've got roughly the right ones, but we'll load them up as we go. So I've loaded this one up already. It takes ages to load up now because the biters be gone mod. I think what that does is it deletes the biters every time. So it takes ages because it runs through and deletes the biters every time you load it up. Because the idea of it is you can switch it off and on and you can turn the biters back on. Yeah, so what I wanted to do to start with, you won't be able to see the notes, but I've got them. So yeah, I just wanted to do a bit of a run through of the stats, basically. That this is what we've done and what we're doing. Is that right? Yeah. So production wise, science first, and obviously, we're getting obviously the sort of spikiness with that's the white science, the space science launching each time, and each one of those sort of little cresty bits is the rocket launch. So that's why that one goes up and down. But the average across sort of 10 minutes, I mean, we could do the longer term, but obviously it's not really been running 100% consistency because of the brownouts and all that sort of stuff for sort of long enough. So we're just coming up to the point where, so that was when I turned the military off. So really, that's when we should look for. But obviously that was only, not well. What's that? About an hour or something before, quarter of an hour or something before the end of the stream last time. So yeah, and then this is where we switch from doing that follow a robot count to the the other one. So these things I don't really understand why it drops out like this very occasionally. You'd think it was where trains are coming or going, but I can't really see any evidence of that. Oh, did I turn science off? Oh, look, I've turned science off anyway, so I don't know why I did that. Yeah, so we'll have one of the mining prods running. Yeah, so it basically does do, well, what I said when I started this is I would go for about 4,000 plus, so sort of more than 4,000 science, and all the builds I tried to do were 5,400 or ish, with the idea that all the inefficiencies, if they added up, we would still get about 4,000. But it does basically run at about 5,000. The problem children are the utility and the chemical science. And those were the ones we looked at last time, where what's happening here is basically the steel is not getting enough iron plate. So I could solve that in a number of ways. We could add on more lanes of iron plate coming in, which would be both not difficult and difficult in that I don't really have the room to have a second load of unloading. Obviously, we could have, what's that, 2, 4, 6, 8. So we've got 8, so we could maybe, split them maybe, but really they're pretty much eating these lines of iron plate fully. So really we would need to sort of have another station, maybe bleed some off of here, or, so there are a few options, but what we'd have to do is bring them round and probably feed in at the top here. So bring some across, so that these can get access to more iron plate. Because basically it's the top end here that isn't quite getting it. So that would be fixable relatively simply. But the purple science is more complicated, basically. And I'm still not 100% sure exactly what's wrong, if I'm totally honest, with the purple, because as you can kind of see now, we've got some weird situations going on. So these guys here have completely stacked up this entire row of furnaces, whereas these guys aren't really are only sort of trickling producing them. Obviously prod modules are completely non-problematic for all here, because it's just stacked up. In fact, it's not these aren't running full time. And as you can see here, we've got like fully stacked up rail on these belts, but because it's not getting very many of the furnaces, it's dropping out production. And so what I think is probably wrong is that it's steel again, basically. That these guys aren't really... I don't understand why these guys have been running... So this bottom end is sort of fully stacked up and running, more than it should be. And it has full access to steel on some of them. But then on the top, that's not the case. So it doesn't really have access to steel. So it could be some error I've made in the belts coming across. It's more likely to be that, and I think that's what I suggested last time. I couldn't really properly work it out though, because as you can see here, this is not properly saturated belts, and it's because I'm dividing 8 lanes into whatever that is, 9, is it? 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, no, 10. So it's 8 lanes going into 10. So it's the same issue again, that I could probably unload more here and push more material down these lanes. But the thing I was noticing, and why that doesn't quite sound like the full solution, well, I suppose it could be, is these guys are fully stocked. They've got enough iron plate, and there's like loads of iron plate here going this way into this mess, basically, of belts. And so really these should still be getting enough steel, but they're not. It's all a bit confusing. So I think fundamentally what I'm saying is that the design isn't actually able to do 5,000 science or 5,400, and it's probably the steel that's the culprit. But when I tried to watch it during the week, it didn't really seem to work. It didn't seem to be the case, if you see what I mean. These guys are running. It's not like they're completely stopped all the time. So it's maybe something to do with this, that I'm feeding sort of too much in on this end, and maybe I should, you know, take some of this steel and feed it in at the top, maybe. But then why doesn't that affect the bottom end? Do you see what I mean? It's all a bit sort of, that doesn't make sense. And obviously we did have the issue with the rods, but I think we fixed that, didn't we? Yeah, so I'd say they're the sort of only problem children. I think the purple would be essentially unfixable without reworking quite a bit, whereas blue would be fixable. The other thing I did want to do is some of the other sort of stats. So we've killed an unbelievable number of biters and all sorts, basically. So we've killed 343,000 big spitters and 330,000 big biters. Nearly 250,000 each of behemoth biters and spitters. 100,000 behemoth worms. And as you can see there, I mean, I think I did actually try and look, because it's not quite 1 million, or is it just over 1 million? So if those are added together are going to be more than 500,000. That's more than that. Excuse me, more than 500,000. So yeah, we've killed over 1 million biters in this game. Yeah, I never know. I'll be honest, I never know. I assume this means when it says kills versus losses, this is the stuff I've destroyed, and this is the stuff essentially the biters have destroyed. So you see, I've got 1 here and 2 there. Now there's a few more than that because I didn't save it some of the times when I got killed. But this, I don't quite. I assume this means when the train ran me over. And obviously that's when I died to biter deaths. Look, the biters have killed 41 trains and apparently 50 radars. 3 fast transport bells. So yeah, so I mean, it's walls and bots that have really taken the losses, basically. Oh, and I suppose. I mean, those you would expect. It counts those when the biters run over a landmine. Excuse me. That counts as killing the landmine, even though, I believe, even though that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to explode. And I think it stacks up both. So some of these will have got destroyed by spitters, you know, splash damage. And others, I think when it counts them, it means, you know, the biters ran over it. Because they're not. So there's ones here as well, you see, on this side. So, say, I don't know how it's breaking those down. Because they're about the same, you see, but you would expect biters to have died more than me running them over. More wooden chests than I would have guessed. Where's the wooden chests? Yeah, so 344 wooden chests biters have apparently killed. Mine will be a lot because I tend to do a thing where, I mean, you'll have seen it. I stack a load of wood into a wooden chest and blow up the wooden chest just to get rid of it. There you go. Ah, that's exactly the same number, isn't it? Ah, so it must be double counting some things then, because it must count any wooden chest that I blew up and the biters blew up as both being. Ah, no. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand those stats because. So that's exactly the same number. But some of them aren't. So, you know, it's 1 here and 2 there. Is that one counted in that or what? That's interesting. I've only got 1 solar panel there and none on the kill side. So maybe all of the wooden chests were ones I blew up, and the biters have never destroyed a wooden chest. Maybe that would make some sense. But then I say, it doesn't seem to be counting the same things. When I say I, obviously that includes, you know, my turrets and whatever are doing that. So because there you go, we've got 691 walls. and 6,900 ores. So this must be stuff. Maybe this is the total. But then why it can't be. It has to be lost to biters, doesn't it? Or I guess if I blew something up, Interesting. Lost 5 cars. Shows you how bad I am at circle strafing. Trees, 1,500. It counts the trees differently. So the trees are different. In fact, can I get it to filter to trees? Yeah, so if you look at all the trees, it's an absolute ecological disaster that I've wrought upon this planet. What's the total there? That's 100. That's like 200. It's got to be nearly 250,000 trees, something like that. Wow. Take that, COP26. Pollution. So let's put that on all time. So the big polluters then, are the mining drills, the assembly machines, electric furnaces, obviously chemical. Chemical is very, very polluting. But then we got a lot from when I've been using boilers, and then obviously the different types of same entities. But as you can see, pollution is only generated from sort of production machines. So, you might think, in fact, I always thought nuclear produced some pollution as well. I guess it's all wrapped up in there, but it looks like the actual nuclear power plants don't produce pollution. That's interesting. But then obviously it's been absorbed by trees in particular. And what that's showing there, so that's trees, but that's dead trees. So when you kill the trees with pollution, excuse me, that's what that counts as. Oh, I should actually, sorry. I was fiddling about on my sound set. That's why. That should be better. Because I noticed on the video, I put on a noise gate, and it's actually cutting off my audio. I don't know why it shouldn't be, but I should have noise suppression on instead. But then my neighbours, they were having some carpets put in, so there was a lot of banging and crashing about. So I put the noise gate back on, but I think they're finished now. So this is the amount of things I've built. So it doesn't. I don't think it counts. When I put it down in what do you call it? Creative mode. I don't think it counts those, so it's not counted the extra ones. Excuse me, I built there. But yeah, we've got ridiculous numbers of some things. This was one I'd spotted that was interesting. So I've made 35 tanks. What I think this must be, or my only guess on that, I haven't made 35 tanks. I've only lost a couple. It maybe counts it if you pick it up and put it down again. Was what I was thinking. Because yeah, we got deconstructed is 35 as well. But then we've got 25 there and 20 there. Although I suppose I lost 5 of those, didn't I? So 5 of them got blown up. So it must count, just putting something down, even if you then pick it up again in this column, as being, built. Which I suppose makes sense, but it doesn't mean built as in they've been built in a machine. It means you've placed them on the map, I think. But yeah, so, this sort of emphasises one of the main points that, this is it's basically 28 a minute, and this entire file has been going for, I think it was 26 days or something, total time. So, on average, there's one solar panel being built every 28, half an hour basically. I guess that, no, No, other way round. There's 30 been built a minute, hasn't there, basically? So yeah, that shows you just how many of those there are. Fluids, I never find fluids particularly interesting. Actually, it's sort of, I mean, G, it means giga, which is billion, basically, so 1,000 million. But yeah, it's obviously water and steam are the big culprits, like by a country mile. Lots of cargo wagons. In the buildings, you mean? Oh yeah, 2,300. Yeah, it must count them every time you place them down, because there's been a lot of me, putting a train down and then deciding to pick it up again. In fact, is that on there? Yeah, so 283 I've picked up. So basically, we've got 2,000 cargo wagons still running, and we've picked up about 300 of them. Items wise, then, so the really big one is obviously copper cables at basically 1.4 billion copper cables. These then sort of creeping up towards a billion iron plates and copper plates. And this shows, one of the things I think this emphasises is the effective productivity modules. So in order to make 884 million iron plates, I've only actually used 553 million iron ore. So the extra 130 million has come from prod modules. So that's like, it's getting on for 20%, isn't it? Free stuff from prod modules, basically. And yeah, half a billion circuits. In fact, let's have a look at the achievement. There's an achievement for building 10,000. No, there you go, 20 million electronic circuits. And we've made 514 million. So I've done that achievement. Oh no, maths. 5 makes it 100. 25 times, effectively, I think. I think that's right. But yeah. So a remarkable number of turbines, isn't it? I guess that's because I did end up with this whole mess of nuclear down here, basically. Yeah, 2,400 locomotives and 2,200 cargo wagons. So in total, I've made 8.5 million space science, 8 million logistics. In fact, it's probably 8 million of it, all of those, basically. Yeah, apart from them two, I guess, then. I wonder why there's that. I guess there's that significant discrepancy because a lot of the sciences don't involve prod and a lot don't involve military. So, yeah. So if there's anything else you wanted to look at on them, just shout and we can look at that. But, I mean, there are some, bonkers numbers. We've made 1,400 shotgun shells. I mean, where was that? Somehow I've made 1,000 energy shields as well. Blimey. I guess that's the Mark 1, isn't it? And you need 10 of those for each level 2. Only one of each of the weapons, though. There you go. So I've only made one tank, and yet it said it had 10 built, didn't it? Or whatever it was, 20 built or something. So I guess it must be that it counts it as you pick them up and put them down. I've only made one burner inserter. And 11 burner mining drills. I guess that emphasises just how much I hate the burning phase of the game. 52 power switches. Huh. Oh, I guess I made a stack of them, didn't I? 100 energy shields. 3.2 million walls. Wow. It's just bonkers, isn't it? Especially when this is about, when they say, well, it's not really a megabase, it's a kilo base. No, it's a megabase because you make millions of some of the stuff. Right, so power then was, I say, the other one I wanted to look at. So that's the 1,000-hour chart. And it basically, I mean, we'll come back to it, but as you can see, it's beacons that have just been absolutely bonkers in this base. If we go up to the 10-minute numbers, oh, that's the accumulators, sorry. I was wondering, are we getting a brownout again? But the beacons are just sucking up 30 gigawatts of power on their own. And basically, I mean, obviously, if you ignore accumulators, I'm pretty sure that if you add everything else together, it doesn't come out to the same as the beacons. I hate Bernard says, yeah, I just hate that technology because it's like a waste of coal, going into making, an arm move about, and it's like to me it's such a wasteful part of the game. And particularly since, I mean, you've got basically access to electricity immediately. So it's like, well, just crack on, get on with electricity. You don't need burning technology. But yeah, I do. I really don't like that part of the game, to be honest with you. But yeah, so 30 gigawatts of electricity just into the beacons. And so I say, if we look at the full-time chart, one of the things that is good with beacons is that that's it. They don't go up and down as you produce stuff. It is continuous, so you can tell sort of how much power you need to be producing. But still, these numbers here versus this up here, it's just absolutely insane the amount of power that's going into beacons. Absolutely nuts. I never quite understand what this one's meant to be showing, the all-time chart. Because it certainly isn't the total amount of power that's been consumed. And obviously, if 62,000, maybe it's the average across all time. But yeah, it's sort of, it doesn't quite. Maybe it is. It's the average across. So, the base hasn't been going for 1,000 hours, so that would be the average across 1,000 hours, and that's the actual runtime average, maybe. Not sure, but yeah. So I say, majority of the power has come from solar now. But steam, nuclear was the average would make sense. Yeah, I think so. Steam turbines, so nuclear was actually really quite effective, I think. When I was fired it up during the week, I had thought I might do some more, but I just couldn't. I think I'm done. But I sort of got rid of the nuclear, and it didn't actually make that much difference on the UPS and FPS point of view. Obviously, it wasn't running, so it maybe wasn't a. Excuse me again. Maybe it wasn't a fair comparison. But yeah, it didn't drop. It didn't really gain much from the UPS. So maybe it is a viable way of running a megabase. I don't know. Right, was that all of the stats I wanted to quickly look at? Science, power, production. Oh, I guess I could look at the game time. Hang on. Just to confirm. It is time, is it? Yeah, so it's been running for 26 days, 10 hours, 37 minutes and 56 seconds. I couldn't really give you a good estimate of what that is in terms of how much idle time there was. There wasn't really any idle time until we got to things like building the solar array. As I mentioned when I did it at the time, this extension, I mean, not this, to be honest with you, was idle time. It was just the base doing that, basically. This wasn't. This was me cheating. But eventually, I would have done the same thing, to be honest with you. Just left it running. don't know where my nose is running now. A bit inconvenient. Yes, so those were the sort of basic stats for the base. And I think the sort of conclusion was, if you say the point of the series was, can I make a Megabase? Yes, but it's probably not as efficient and good as it could be, which isn't exactly unexpected. When anyone plays Factorio, can they launch a rocket? Yes, they can, but maybe they learn a lot while they're doing that and would do better the next time. So that's kind of the conclusion I expected. Right then, so first of all, running through sort of the lessons learned, basically, I did want to just highlight, because it is going to sound like a lot of me complaining or being very self-critical. And basically, I did just want to highlight that actually, I think there were some things that I did okay or were good ideas. And the first one was basically that it was fun. So I did enjoy doing the series. I know, particularly towards the end, there was quite a lot of me moaning. I mean, I moan about it. I'm just a moaner, basically. But there's me moaning about having to do a lot of grindy stuff. But to some extent, that was a reflection of problems I'd made for myself. So, like I say with this, where it was, sticking in a load of solar panels and just leaving it running overnight to do all that, that was because I wasn't producing enough panels, really. And I say we'll come on to that later on. But, if I'd been producing panels a lot more efficiently, and if I hadn't stopped, if I'd said, right, well, we need to just keep going and keep going and keep going, it's a new disclaimer, yeah, that's exactly it. If I had said, right, I'm just going to keep making solar panels for all time, then we wouldn't have ever had that issue, because, I would have just kept going. And, the time I spent doing everything else, it would have just kept adding more and more and more solar panels. And so there wouldn't have been a point where I, because it's like having to catch up with myself. So it's fun. I enjoy streaming it. But it did take so long that it ended up feeling like a grind. I would do it again now that I know more, and I'm sure it would be quicker and easier. But not for a while. I'm going to do some other things first. The second one was particularly like yourself, Ian. People watched. Grateful to anyone that kept coming back, whether that was just to watch or to chat, or some people offered suggestions and advice and that sort of thing, which was all great. And it also sort of vindicated the idea of doing it as a streaming series, because it was like, when I started, it was sort of, if I have to do it, on a stream, and I've said I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it every weekend, then I'd feel guilty, maybe? I don't know if that's the right word, but if I just stopped and gave up like I normally do, I don't think that would have been, it felt like I needed to do it, for the series. I mean, I didn't, it's all just a bit of fun, but, it just gave it a bit more of an impetus to do it. However, the sort of flip side to that is I did put a lot of pressure on myself, particularly towards the end. When I was doing these extensions, I was basically playing it continuously, which is not particularly healthy, full stop. It sort of reminded me back from when I enjoyed watching. I'm glad. I'm glad you've been enjoying it. But it sort of reminded me back, like a lot of people, when they first start playing the game, they get sort of addicted to it and play it too much. But that's sort of, fun in a sense. I say not healthy and not something you should do long term at all. But this ended up, it almost felt like a job. It just felt like a 9 to 5, although sort of after my 9 to 5, but it ended up feeling like a job. And I could have taken a break. I could have done it slower. I could have started another series. But say I felt like I needed to push through it, which is probably a bad idea, really. Next one was creative mode. So I did identify a save file. I've no idea whether it's got creative mode switched on, though. There is one. Okay, so let's load up. So I've got the post-mortem ones in here. Was it 55? I don't think creative mode is switched on in this. is it going to tell me about the mods? Oh. Okay. What happened there? Okay. And Jetty as well, yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed. I'm really glad you've been coming back. There's been a couple of people do sort of pop in and stuff, but it's really good to have someone to chat to. This doesn't look like. Okay. Let's quit out. This might take a while. It might be because I'm using a subfolder for the post-mortem stuff. I can always move it back. Let's see if we can... In fact, let's turn the mod off, in case that's getting confused. So it'll have to restart the game. I just chucked these all in because this like it's ridiculous, the total size of all the saves together. You see that says 55 there. Let's load it up again though. Oops. Load game. 55. Ah. Oh, has it tried to put... What? Mods have been removed and mod setting has changed. If I just load it... Well, this has gone wrong already. I'm not sure why that's... Are you deleting the biters? I mean, that's not 55. Game 55. Oh dear. Let's... Hang on, I'll just nip into the... If I go into the save files, take them out of the folder. I always thought it would load from a folder. In fact, I'm sure I've done that before. So move them up a level. It doesn't. I can load another one, but so we want to load. So why does it say playtime 634 hours? It's done so unless I accidentally saved that and saved it over the top, maybe. But it's lost that file. Okay, so what I was going to... I mean, I can load up the test map. See what's a load. Because this has got the creative mode on. Oh. Yeah. We're doing well here. It's probably fuzzy-headedness from the cold, to be honest with you. So this was my test map. We did come over. We did do, you know. I'm wondering if I've got too many mods downloaded and stuff. Yeah, so this was a test map, and this was obviously white science, you know, the space science. But I used this to design, you know, purple science. And in fact, you can see here I've got a different arrangement of belts. So maybe when I tried to make this more for purple, this is make it sort of more efficient. What I actually did was make it less efficient. Anyway, and then obviously we got all of them. So we got blue science here, and this was purple at the top. No, is that purple? No, it's gold. Sorry. So yeah, so I was really like impressed with Creative Mode mod. I've used it before, but obviously, as I say, I've never really done megabasing, so I've never used it at this scale. I've done more sort of fiddling about with little bits and pieces in creative mode when I didn't want to worry about having to build everything and just wanted to test out a few things. But yeah, really sort of impressed with this. There is also the editor. It's like a vanilla version of the creative mode, but this has more stuff in it and more sort of things. Yeah, so I say I really sort of enjoyed this, and what I was quite interested, and what I was trying. So when I started the series, I was sort of thinking I would do all of this design work in my own time, as it were, and then just implement the builds in the game. But when we actually did, I think it was Gold Science. We might have done Purple as well, but when we actually did the build of Gold Science just in this mode, that was one of the things I enjoyed the most about the series, because sort of being freed from having to do all the production stuff was like really fun. And it's the design stuff is one of the things I really enjoy in the game, and so just being able to do that sort of free form was really enjoyable. I really enjoyed doing that. I say one of the things I would say about it though is that probably it gives you like a false impression of whether things are working or not, because particularly when you're doing this and you're feeding in infinite materials, just fully compressed belts, that's fine, but you've then got to sort of say, right, well, okay, let's put in the train station. All right, you maybe fake the train station, as in it's it's not really going and picking up resources, it's spawning the resources in the train sort of thing, or even just an infinite resource pickup or something like that. Like a fake the whole system, because one of the things I did struggle with was the number of trains to put in. And as you saw in the Purple Science, if it is, and I'm not convinced, as I say, if it is because I've not got enough, unloading of iron plates for the steel, that's just hidden by this. You can't tell. That's the problem. So I think I did try it somewhere. It does make the process a lot longer. Here we go. So this build, I've got some fake trains just spawning stuff. Obviously this is an old school feeding thing, but I think that's probably a better way of testing builds. But yeah, I'm really impressed with creative, and I'm more open-minded to basically using it for streams, for saying, well, with this stream we're just going to design stuff, so let's do it in creative mode. Right, so if I quit the game and then turn off the mods again, hopefully it won't cause everything to fall down. Yeah, so the next one, sort of next positive as it were, was the early game. I think the so if I load, what have I got here? So episode 22 or stream 22. So this is the one where we launched a rocket, or we had just launched a rocket. Oh, didn't even know that was queued up. Cracky. Yeah, we launched a rocket in this stream, 22, and I don't think that's too bad going. Obviously, the game time at this point was quite high. There you go. So 3 days, 3 hours. So what's that? 25. So it's about 78 hours or something. So it is a fair amount of time, but I don't think that's too bad, for launching a rocket. Considering I was yapping away. Plus, I say I'll open this one in a second. I didn't, I cocked up the power here as well. It's a bit of a running theme, the power. I massively underestimate the amount of power, full stop. But one of the things this also shows, this is finishing the game. Basically finish the game. And, the Megabase is sort of that big, isn't it? It's like, if I think it's zoomed in about that much. And that's the Megabase. Look at the number. How many solar panels have we got in this? So if we do a power thing. Let's do that. So, I mean, they're all running, but 1.6 gigawatts compared to the, what is it? It's about 80. I can't even remember what the numbers are. But yeah, so we've only got 5,600 solar panels versus 1.4 million now in the Megabase, and that's not actually even enough to run the game. Where am I going to see the runtime? So the runtime basically it's a console command. So the it's a old school attacks. The tilde key. So just underneath the escape key is that it's tilde. Basically, it's like a weird it's tilde. It's like a curvy line. Basically, if you hit that key, it brings up the console, which is this list of stuff here. Now these are all messages. It's fired up, so it's a way of doing it, and it's how you do multiplayer messages and stuff. But you hit the tilde key, and it enables that console. Oh, I wonder what that's for. And basically, if you do a command, so /, and there are a range of commands, you can look them up on the wiki, but the range of commands that, if you use them, will disable achievements, so you need to steer clear of those if you're worried about achievements. But there's a whole range of commands you can use that don't disable achievements. So one of them is just time, and that tells you the total game time. But another one, for example, is seed, and that tells you what the game seed is. I can't remember any off the top of my head. 1.4 million total panels, yeah. So yeah, there's a range of commands you can use that. In fact, I think if you just do that, it does that. So that's how you do multiplayer chat things. So that would appear to all players. It would just say hello, on everyone's screen. Right, yes. So I say this was the base, and I say the Megabase is like this. So it just shows you the sort of scale of it. Right, what was my next thing on the? Oh, I suppose the thing to note on that point though is if we load up, and hopefully this one will just load straight off. I think this was the one. So several episodes later, I tried to tidy up the old base. Is this it? This must have been after the tidy up. Yeah, okay. It's the wrong file. But basically, because the original base, the sort of starter base, was in this area here. So in this, below where it says solar pickup. That was a bit of a mistake when I did that. And that was because I just set the bots to unload, to just taking everything apart. And there were just chests and chests and chests of stuff. And of course the bots are really power hungry, and it just sucked all the power out of the base. And I kept, browning out and browning out and browning out. Here we go. So, yeah. So this is obviously what I must have done. I must have stuck the steam turbines in to cope with that. So that was where it was browning out, I guess. Yeah, but you can sort of see the Roboport spiking, where I did that. I think I've got the wrong file there, but yeah, that was sort of a mistake I made that delayed things quite a lot. Right, so early game I thought was quite good. Local smelting. Yeah, so if we can load this one up, this might take a while. So 53. So this is the one where I think I've just finished purple. Have I just finished purple here? Yeah, so purple's sort of... I'm just finishing up some of the last outposts for purple. And what I was basically going to say is that I think local smelting is my preferred way of doing things, I think, for the big scale. Because another sort of overall way of doing things is to centralize all of your production. So you basically have, you would have, you actually divide it up into several things, but, you'd have, say, all of the iron smelting together and all of, say, the copper smelting together. And so you can divide it up, but like, having dedicated copper smelters or, dedicated iron smelters as a place. And the sort of advantage to that is you can basically leave that alone. So once you've set it up and built it, game audio seems really loud. Let's just turn that down a bit. That's not made a lot of difference. But once you set it up, and all you need to do is just feed in materials, so you can then mine patches and just add more patches or change patches or whatever. So it does have an advantage, centralized smelting, but the disadvantage is that because of the packing issue, so a train, can I find a train? A train with I can't even find any trains. There we go. Oh, that's coal. Well, there you go. So coal raw resources only stack to 50. So this train has only got 14,000 on it. It's emptying, but that would have 28. Well, it's 16, isn't it? 16,000 and 32,000. And so it's literally half a train is gone. And so if you do local smelting, you don't have to worry about training the materials over. You can just and I think that's okay for normal base scale, and it's what I've done for the bus and stuff. But when you get to big scale, I think local smelting is my preferred solution, with the caveat that I wouldn't do 12 beacons for everything. I would do 12 beacons for steel, I think. But whether I did... What I would probably do is a central steel and central green circuits, central red circuits probably. Maybe not central blue circuits, because the amount of stuff you have to build to fill a train with blue circuits is ridiculous. But yeah, so I'd probably do 8 beacons. The later design I had, where I'd squished it up, I think is better for this. If I was doing 12 beacons, but I think I'd go 8 beacons because the amount of extra power that's going into this isn't justified. So the amount of extra, juice to run half as many beacons again, essentially, is not benefited from the fact that... So the cost benefit essentially is having 12 beacons means I can have less smelters, right? But smelters with 8 beacons aren't that expensive to run. So having, say, 4 extra smelters to fill a lane of iron plate is much less power than 9 smelters with 12 beacons. It's a real big difference overall. And that's if you go to 8. 6 is actually quite good as well. But yeah, so I would go differently with, I wouldn't do 12 beacons everywhere, stick to that religiously. But local smelting, I think, is my preferred solution. But say it comes on to later points about that I wouldn't do this, basically. I wouldn't do outposts. But so we'll come back to that. So yeah, and I say one of the reasons for sort of both of those is so obviously something like purple is a perfect example of my general approach, where it was like, I'll 12 beacon everything, and I've stuck religiously to that. And that's been a bad decision. So what I should have done is some things. So for example, a good example of why that's just not sensible is the green circuits, because green circuits are produced very fast anyway. It's like half a second, isn't it, to produce a single green circuit. And then if you factor in the speed of the machine and say having the number of beacons on it, like basically 2 machines can saturate a belt whether it's 12 beacons or 8 beacons. Yeah, so having 12 beacons is basically just wasting power. And what 8 beacons also allows you to do is, so it's wasting power both in terms of you don't need, those 4 beacons basically, so they go. But what you can also do when you do 8 beacons is, I haven't got any. I have. There we go. Is you effectively have rows of beacons, and you can kind of you've got like a maximum range or maximum sort of distance. So I'm not arranging that properly. But what you can do is you can actually sort of make these closer so that they overlap, and you can can have the green circuit machine there, but you can also have the cable machine within the same thing. So I mean, that's not very, it probably ends up being something like that, but basically you can then do direct insertion, which saves you all sorts of hassle and time troubles. But you can also use chests and multiple chests, however it'd end up being. I've not designed an 8 beacon thing in years, but and then you have, say that's the iron plate coming in, and that's, say, the copper coming in. Oops. Something like that, or whatever, whatever it ends up being. So we've not only saved 4 beacons for that machine on its own, obviously it needs an output as well, doesn't it? So I don't know, that'd be something like that or something. Whatever it ends up being. So we've not only saved 4 beacons for the green circuit machine, you save beacons for the copper cable machine as well. You also save UPS because, you'd obviously limit this to... I don't think you need 2 chests, but whatever it ends up being, that's both quicker. So the other issue, one of the things with 12 beacons when you do it, is you've always got to have belt. Well, I mean, you can obviously use bots, but you've always got to have belt-based insertion. So you've got to have the room for that. And you've only got a limited number of ways you can get in. If you go with the compressed 12, you have even less. But you've always got to put things onto belts. So as you can see, the green circuits have got to go onto a belt. Sorry, the cables have got to go onto a belt, which have got to be fed in to the assembler via a belt. And you get a lot of quirks with how inserters work. So whether they pick stuff up directly and which lanes they pick stuff up off actually affects like the throughput. So I've oversaturated everything to try and compensate for the fact that these work in a bit of a weird way when picking up from belts. Whereas if you do this, because it just literally chucks everything into a chest simultaneously, it doesn't unload into a chest, it literally just swings over, puts it in, swings over, puts it in. Whereas from a belt, it picks individual items up. Yeah, so it's slower picking up off a belt. I mean, I say it's very dependent on geometries and all that sort of stuff. But if it just chucks it in a chest, it's instantaneous. And when it picks up from a chest, it's instantaneous. So that is massively quicker than having a whole set of belts with stuff on them. And it's also less like UPS intensive, because what I actually found with the the final base is that it's rocket launches that really kill the UPS. Yeah, it's not really all these fluids and nuclear and all that sort of stuff. Yes, those have a big impact, but it's rockets, firing off rockets, and all the production associated with that is what really kills the UPS for me. And there's no way around that. You're always going to have to launch 6 rockets a minute in order to produce that amount of science. So things like this are probably going to have more benefit if you're going to make the actual production more efficient. And that's not simply sticking in 12 beacons for everything. My thought was that if everything's 12 beaconed, then it means that a lot of machines will be sat idle, and that'll actually sort of help what I want to do. But actually, that's not really useful. It's it's this that I think is quicker and better. I think. Obviously, that's not. I say I've just literally thrown that down. That's not actually. I don't think they're even orientated properly. But you can then just copy and paste that up as you need it, sort of thing. Whatever it ends up being like, Oops. Yeah, so I would go a lot more 12 beacons, but things like steel, I would stick with 12 because steel is so slow. I would have I would probably have a dedicated steel production area, and I would be a bit more sensible or a bit more pragmatic about saying, because all that's being delivered here is raw materials, and if you count, say, iron plate and copper plate as raw materials, it's all raw materials. So it's raw stone, raw stone brick, raw iron plate, raw copper plate, raw coal, And I would probably do something like centralised plastic, centralised steel, localised smelting for iron and copper still, and maybe deliver iron plate to the steel smelting rather than iron ore. Stone brick, I don't know, because stone brick's a bit of a weird one. It's only used for... Is that right? It's only used for military and purple. So maybe they could share a steel a brick smelting. But it feels like actually, even localised stone brick production is not actually all that helpful. Maybe that's one to actually incorporate locally in the build of purple. But yeah, so I would stick with a lot of raw stuff, but steel would be centralised production, and that would make feeding everything in a lot easier and simpler as well, because I could just load steel in. What else? Yeah, so I would have, and the basic reason is I would have a heck of a lot more room for things like this. And if these are produced so quickly that 12 beacon is actually harmful, I think, maybe, than helpful. The smelters, because they're only half a second each. But I probably wouldn't do blue circuits centralised, because as I say, it's such a density of material going in that if you're having to send blue circuits to multiple places, you actually need a massive amount of blue circuit production. Or I guess you could limit the trains and stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't stick religiously to 12 beacons. I mean, when I built this, I thought this was all the solar panels we were going to need. How many have we got? So we've only got not even got 500,000 solar panels. And I thought maybe we'd double it to 1 million, but actually we needed 3 times as much. Well, double it to 900,000. We needed 3 times as much, and that doesn't even run the base. In terms of belts and bots, my next point, if I load up coal, I think it's this one. So my next point was belts rather than bots. Obviously, that's how I did the base, and that's probably basically how I would do it again, because for me, Factorio is belts. You know, that kind of is the game. But having said that, what I would probably actually do is some of these resources, particularly like coal and stone, where, as say, because stone brick is used so infrequently, or so such a small volume of it, what I would probably do is coal and stone I would have as bot-based builds, because when I was running the final base, because coal is really actually quite plentiful. Stone not so much really, but you don't use very much of it. But coal is everywhere with default settings. You know, there's loads of coal all over the place, and so having quite a lot of coal builds, you know, coal mining, I don't think is that much of a problem. And I say I would probably go with bot-based coal builds because, I say, when I was watching it running, it's actually quite efficient. I wouldn't use them for, or would I? I probably wouldn't overall. But a hybrid, like localized smelting, might actually be quite sensible. Where, for example, you have mining into chests for bots, because when mining prod gets as high as it is at the end of my game, you know, the Megabase, like one cycle of the mining drills like half fills a chest. So having, you know, belts is almost a waste, because, you know, a lot of them just sit there doing nothing, because, you know, a couple of miners can fill an entire belt. So I think maybe a hybrid is like the ultimate solution, in that it also saves on space, you know, because you don't have to worry too much about balancing raw materials coming out. The bots sort of do that automatically. That's the oil build. Yeah, so you don't need belts going round to do stuff. You just literally have this, you know, nice and close. Lots of roboports around it. And this is a hybrid of, you know, a requester chest and a belt. So you get the belt stuff out and stick that in the train. And what that does is it separates the issue between, because if you have a fully bot-based build, you have to sort of account for the fact that the bots are going to have to do 2 types of jobs, but, you know, deliver raw material and pick up and deliver process material. And I was having a lot of trouble with getting it to fill all of the chests evenly, even with all the changes they've done to make it better. They weren't really filling the chests evenly. Whereas with belts and a balancer, you can just basically guarantee that. Not that I had a balancer here, which was possibly a bad decision. Yeah, so I would go belts again, but I would probably do coal and stone with bots, because it's just simpler and easier, basically. And I think maybe a hybrid is probably the ultimate solution, really. Right, next one was using a bus to make the Megabase. So, save file 32. But the game's getting really confused, me loading up all sorts of random files. So, I'm actually, hang on a second. Going to read this one out. So, busing for Megabase. I think I need to come up with a more specific bus scales concept if I'm to do this again. So it will make modules at a given rate amount for the bus itself and to build the initial factories, etc. But then I have to make a separate factory for each of the... well, I just said solar panels here, but modules, solar panels, those types of things. Military as well. Refactoring the end of the bus to be the module factory was just a bad idea. So what I'm referring to here is that initially I had these simple small-scale production things for modules. I like the belts because I like to watch them. Yeah, I do as well. One of my favourite things is just watching stuff flowing up and down my buses when I've built them. I really just love watching that. And the outposts and stuff. Watching trains arrive and drop things off, and that it's sort of it's like Zen basically, isn't it? It's sort of calming. But what I did, having made these small scale ones, which I think are fine, I wouldn't do it differently as such for this. But what I then tried to do was, because I then beaconed all of this production, and that gave me a load of extra material. And what I then tried to do was feed that up here. In fact, this isn't a very good file to have loaded up actually, but I tried to feed it up here into the bus and have all the module production at the end. And that got so complicated that by the time I'd finished it, I'd actually made all the modules that I needed. So when it was sort of, right, I've done this, now it can make all the modules. I didn't actually need it to make any more modules. I'd made so many during that process that it was just redundant. What this does show was, what I'm talking about is a bus designed for the Megabase, is to come up with a bit more of a standardised way for doing... Because it's standardised in the sense that I've repeated the same basic way I've done buses every time I've done buses. I've come up with a formula for how I do them that does work, that lets you launch a rocket. It's fairly quick, and I enjoy doing. But what I mean is, instead of having... Because what I then decided was, right, well, I need a lot more green circuits, I need a lot more red circuits, I need a lot more blue circuits. And I made separate factories all the way over here. And eventually, I then realised that it was better to transition them into here. But that then meant this whole train system got really clogged up. When I was running this full pelt, doing science and production, we ended up with a massive traffic jam of trains because it's just not efficient enough, basically, what I'd done. And that's what I would need to solve, I think. So basically a much more efficient way of doing a bus, designed to produce, basically designed to be able to get to a point of being able to make separate factories for solar, modules, beacons, etc., is the way to go. So this isn't, this stays here, and it's like a trickle of modules in order to make, a big solar panel factory. But I don't convert this any further, So when I did these, I was just coming up with builds that would make, a train's worth of green circuits. Whereas really I need a build that is, well, obviously it's 4 lanes of green circuits, 2 lanes of red and 1 of blue. And it's just literally built to do that. And it's localised to here. Sort of like what we ended up with, but I didn't do any of the maths at all. And this issue of, these smelting arrays, when you stick out, beacons on them, they, they produce more than a lane's worth of stuff. And I need a solution to that, because when I tried to rework it all, it was just a nightmare, basically. So yeah, I like the bus, I like that way of doing it. It is a bit boring, admittedly. Factory towns is quite fun when you do that approach, but I don't think factory towns would really work for mega basing. because you're just spending too much time, doing the factory towns in the first place, and that's sort of what the Megabase is. It's a set of factory towns, really. Spaghetti. I mean, you could try spaghetti for a Megabase, but not at this scale. I think you'd go mad. What else is there? There's city blocks. City blocks is, I think, quite a good solution generally, but I think it has inherent constraints in it in terms of scale. Also, I personally regard it as a bit boring. I know a lot of people love it, and it is, great sort of thing, but it's not quite as fun to me as a bus. And I know buses are, boring in a sense, but as you say, the stuff moving up the belts, that is Factorio to me. I guess the other one I've sort of covered. The next one I had was the self-contained science builds, which, as I say, I've sort of already talked about. I say sorry for all the biological noises and nose clearing and all that sort of stuff. It's just full of cold, really. Yes, so I've loaded this one up because this should be shortly after. Yeah, so it was shortly after I'd done the blue and the grey science. And I think these two are kind of the limit for this approach because, I made a mistake with these in that I didn't have enough drop-off points. So there should be more drop-off points for material. And like I did with the gold and the purple, they should be much closer to where the actual stuff is being used. So this whole thing of having the plastic here and moving it all up is not great. The plastic should probably be here. And this is one of the other things. I should make more use of local materials, but we'll sort of come on to that one. I think basically having these, just they're way too close together. There's not enough of them. I end up having to have lots of trains to compensate for that. But in terms of the scale of make everything on site, I think blue and military is kind of the limit for that. I don't think the gold and the purple have really worked very well. And as we already know, blue isn't really ideal because it needs more iron for the steel. But yeah, I think, white science is a better example in that I've obviously divided it up per rocket, so they're much smaller, so they're actually quite good. But if I'd put all of the white science together, it just wouldn't have worked because there'd be too much stuff, to go on a single belt sort of thing. But yeah, I sort of talked about that one already, haven't I? So I do love these though. When you see them on the map, they look really awesome, I think. And it's that thing of every Factorio factory looks like a circuit board. It's perfectly encapsulated by these, And I say, even though I don't think the purple's that good, because it clearly doesn't quite produce what it's meant to, I think it looks really awesome. Station naming. So the next one I've got is. So what I did with stations is I went down the approach of having the outposts. Excuse me. The outposts all have generic names. So, have I got some here? Yeah, so iron pickup and copper pickup and things like that. And I think that's great, and I'm happy, with this type of circuit system. It has problems because what you should really do is check the amount that's available to go in every single carriage. Whereas these systems, what they do is they check like the total amount that's available. And if you've got some issue of loading or unloading where it's not even, this will be saying, right, well, I've got 3 train loads worth of stuff, but you might have one set of chests that have nothing in them because of some issue or error that you've made. Now, obviously, you can compensate with a balancer, which I eventually did with the later build, but it's more space. It's a lot bigger. To have a balancer on as well. On both ends, both the raw input and the processed input. I lost the point there, but yeah. So I'm I've done this a lot where it has the generic name and it counts the amount of stuff and that sort of thing, and I know that works well. What I did with the individual science build names works well for the low volume sciences like red, green. I say I should have had more here. But for purple and gold, I've got so many stations, and white as well, so many stations, it's kind of ridiculous. And the number of trains in the final Megabase is just insane. It's just bonkers how many trains I've got. I would say localizing production would help that a lot. But I think I need to sort of bite the bullet and really get my head around demand side. Because you can do basically almost like the reverse, where it says, right, well, I want to have 2 trains worth of fuel stuff in my chests. And so it counts up the amount in there and requests 2 trains, basically. I always struggle with the circuits for that a little bit, because it's like backwards in a sense. Excuse me. It's backwards in a sense. Compared to the other one. But I think I probably need to get my head around it, because I ended up with, I think, purple has, is it like 8 iron plate stations or something? It's more than that, I think, maybe. And it's just too much to deal with. And this train list is like pages and pages and pages and pages of trains. So I think I need to get my head around that issue, basically. Right, so next one then is map generation. So I've talked about this a lot, but it's just to get it all, as I've been doing the series. It's just to get it all sort of into the one thing. Just 1 second, hang on. Sorry, I had to properly blow my nose then. I think that was probably a bit too much to put out on the stream as well. Right, so yes, so I've loaded this one up because this is basically me. Where are we? So actually, I must have. I don't remember. Oh yes, I swapped out 2 of the things, didn't I? For 2. So it was 4 carriages of red science eventually. But basically, I loaded up this one because it kind of shows the map issues. Bing, bong, bing. It kind of shows the map issues basically with default settings for a Megabase. Because when you're dealing with something like red science, it's not too bad. Yeah, because what I should have done is use more of these local patches rather than go outposting. But that's a separate question, because what I should have been doing, I eventually realised, and I eventually did, is just expand the base. So we should have grabbed these 2 iron patches and this copper, that iron patch, that coal, and moved outwards, just claiming resources as we went, rather than do outposting. But so that's a separate point, because the real point in this is more to do with the size of the builds and the size of everything. So this is red science, and it looks manageable, right? Purple science is like, what, 6 times as big? with more than that for trains. So when you're at that sort of scale, there's nowhere you can put it that doesn't require you to basically landfill entire lakes and build over the top of resources. And the issue really, I think, is that what you really want is resources that are further apart as a minimal thing. You just want them a bit further apart so that you've got room to build. Okay. You could go with default richness and size settings and just have them a bit further apart. But you're making a bit of a rod for your own back in that if they're a lot further apart, it means per unit of map space, there's less material. And so you have to reclaim from the biters more map space to get the resources that you need. If the patches, so if instead of that sort of distance, it was that sort of distance between patches, that'd give you lots of room to build, right? And as I say, you would also reduce the amount of water to give you more land to build on, with less problems. So I think you have to increase the richness and like size of the patches because of the distance. You need bigger patches further apart to do this sort of scale of build. I think probably up to, say, maybe 3,000 science per minute. Default settings are perfectly good and viable. But when you get up to needing double that, basically, what I was struggling with, or why I went for big patches. I went for outposts because I knew the further you get out, the bigger and richer the patches get. So we've got 20 million now. Oh, well, that's still 20 million. In fact, it's this one, isn't it? These patches are bigger. 50 million, 40 million. But they're not actually that much bigger considering how far out we've come. And if we had a richer, bigger patches thing, we would be getting 50 million ore patches here. Because I think it's like a curve rather than a straight line. But basically the sort of density and amount of stuff in the patches, it's only doubled over that gigantic distance. Which isn't a lot, considering how far that is. It takes 10 minutes on a Spidertron to go out that distance. So, as I say, I think you have to increase the density, and decrease the, increase the separation. Because you're going to need more land to build on. And land filling all of this, when you talk about idling, this was a big part of the idling. Just sending Spidertrons out to landfill the entire, entire lakes and stuff it's just wasted time in a sense. So if you have less water, you don't need to do as much of that because you don't actually need that much water, really, in practice sort of thing. Of course, the difficulty, the sort of flip side to that, if you decrease the amount of water, is you have fewer choke points. So we had quite a lot of nice choke points I could use to wall off and protect us from the biters with very little effort. So yeah, you would need bigger walls or bigger defences from the get-go. So there's probably an argument, for like decreasing the aggressiveness of biters to compensate for that, but I don't think I would do that. Yeah, so I think, when you get up to really big science, you kind of have to go down the... You have to go down the dense big patches route. Again, I do apologise for all the biological noises. I can't really help it. What's the next one then? So water. Yeah, so as I say, basically water, I would have much less water. I would set water to be smaller amounts because it turns out you really don't need much water. Its main utility, as I say, is actually creating choke points, I think. you just don't need very much water. I mean, my entire solar nuclear build ended up fitting in one lake, and that was a lot of nuclear. What was the next one? Biters and pollution. So I think I would keep biters and pollution on. They are quite heavy for UPS, and later game, clearing them out became, the reason it's taken, whatever it was, 30 odd days or whatever, is mostly because of biters, clearing out biters. And when you get to a point where, they're not actually a challenge anymore and are just a tedious grind, I think that's the point you either go with the whole, a mod to take off or a console command to get rid of biters, or, excuse me, or you shouldn't be playing with them in the first place. If that grind is too much, you probably need to decide that at the start. And if I hadn't had biters, the whole thing would have been a lot quicker. But I do quite enjoy the combat. I particularly enjoy the whole building fancy defences, but that was quite time costly. And also caused me the whole, the biggest problem with the defences was this whole thing, where because I was going out to outposts, I needed these junctions, and these junctions are just a nightmare. They're just completely horrible. But I needed some way of getting stuff out to outposts to defend them, as well as get the material in, and this was a terrible solution. I should have done something like have a separate line so it should have been a third line for the military stuff to go out. Having said which, the actual solution is just to expand your base. I think that's the way to go. I think if you're doing, a couple of thousand type megabasing, outposts are good because you can bring stuff into more central. You can do a couple of thousand with a very good bus. I don't think it's a bad plan to do. And when you're doing the normal game, outposts are brilliant. That's the way to do things, I think. But when you get to this scale, and I say with so much stuff having to come in for purple and gold science, it's not practical to do outposts, especially if you've got biters on and you need to defend them, and you've got pollution triggering attacks and all that sort of stuff. So it's almost like an either or. So if you didn't have biters and pollution, outposting, well, it's not really even outposting, is it? Because you don't need to defend it. It's just a train out to some resources that you want to grab. Whereas if you have got them on, the whole expand the walls of your base is just way more efficient and way more sensible. But there again, if you're only getting tiny patches, 1.6 million, it's almost not worth exploiting. So there again, you bump up richness, I think, and that sort of all works together. Next one I got on the note is the UPS, and this was sort of saying I was quite amazed that even at the point when we were switching the full thing on, it was only once white science started happening that UPS actually dropped. So even with all of the red, blue, all of those sciences running, it was still hitting 60 UPS, and it was only once I started launching rockets, that it actually hit the UPS. So all of these things about, fluids and... I still hate the fluid mechanics, but from a UPS point of view, and nuclear and stuff, I don't think it's as big a concern as most people think it is. The white science was a problem because the actual launching of the rockets, making and launching the rockets, is really intense. I don't think they've done much optimization there. But it also, you know, when you're launching 6 rockets a minute, that's an enormous amount of production. You know, the white science area is as big as everything else combined, basically. And that, so effectively that suddenly doubles the size of the active base, and that's what hits UPS really. Oh, for this base anyway. Right, let's load a different one up. Oops. Accidentally did 40 again. I think this is because I've got a lot of mods downloaded. It takes a while to load up. 39. Why did I do this one? Oh, blue circuits and modules. I sort of covered this point already, I guess. Yeah, here we go. So this is what I was talking about when I was saying I suddenly decided, right, well, I'm going to build these, you know, module factories. And I'd converted over. So we've now gone from smelting arrays this long to smelting arrays that long with bonus material coming out of them. You know, these produce more than a belt's worth. And it felt like a good idea at the time, but it wasn't. Especially with having sent all of these over here and realising I needed the space to build, you know, blue science and all that sort of stuff. I then relocated them all into the main base. And that's what I say about having a bus concept that I think is more geared up towards doing a megabase. So rather than build just a random green circuit factory that, you know, is probably producing way more than it needs to, build one in this area, you know, next to the bus in a designed, planned way. And this is probably where like factory towns, city blocks comes in, because that's sort of designed for that system. And build a green circuit factory that produces what I need to do, you know, 4 to 1 circuits. And this, as I say, was a bit of a bad idea because, I mean, what in the final megabase, in the final bus base, I've got chests and chests of red circuits because red circuit production was way over the top. In between these and these, because this is all red circuits as well, I'm producing far more red circuits than I ever needed. And I literally have about 25 chests, I think it is, of red circuits just sat there because I didn't actually need to make them as many as I did. So yeah, it's sort of I guess the point really is mathing out everything, not just the science builds, but working out, right, well, I need to make, you know, 1 million modules. How do I do that? You know, how big how many lanes of green circuits do I actually need? And like essentially having the space for them, because this was the other thing. Fitting all of this extra production in proved particularly troublesome because I'd built too much stuff on this side, so I had to rework a lot of belts. So same, a bus concept that it isn't just we'll launch a rocket, it's we'll make a megabase, is something I probably need to work more on. And so that feeds into my comment about my playstyle. So the comment I've got is I've tendency to just make do with what I've got and work around it. So leave things running, double stuff up, rather than make completely separate or dedicated builds. So military is a particularly good example of that. We have, you know, quite a lot of artillery, rockets, and that sort of production. But this is nothing compared to what's in the final base. In the final base, I've got about 10 of these. No, I think it's about 7 of those. Because they make them so slowly, and I needed to clear out, you know, all of this area sort of thing, that what I did, instead of making a dedicated artillery or military factory, I just kept adding more stuff here, you know, sticking more explosives, you know, factories, and you know they're not properly beaconed and blah 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 blah, and just like slap more and more band-aids onto the wound, as it were, rather than say, right, well, let's make, and say solar panels is obviously the classic example, where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so 8 solar builds and whatever that is, 8 accumulators, which is enough, you know, probably for this sort of scale. But the fact that I've then got to make 3 times, or whatever it is, 4 times as many solar panels, you know, my sort of solution to that with my playstyle is just leave it running. You know, it's not, well, let's go and make a, you know, a dedicated factory. It's, well, we'll just see if we can get away with it, essentially. And part of that is not knowing how much I needed for a Megabase. And part of it is just a reflection of, you know, like the sort of flaw, in a sense, of my playstyle. Well, say I'm not. That's not meant as a overly harsh criticism. It's more that I get the cost-benefit analysis wrong. So I tend to say, right, well, I'll just leave it running, and I can just leave the computer doing it, you know, and that'll take, you know, 5 hours or something. Or I could make a new factory, and that'll take sort of 3 hours and produce, you know, the stuff in an hour. And that 1 hour saving, I'm not fussed about. But the trouble is, that's wrong. That whole math is wrong, in that actually it's going to take 20 hours. And so really that factory, which would take it down to, you know, 4 hours, is really worthwhile. So I need to, in a sense, I need to plan more at this stage. Because my whole just get it done philosophy, I think, works for just launching a rocket, but it falls over a bit when you get into this, okay, let's make a Megabase thing. The next one was a sort of simple one. It's one I've not really talked about during any of the things, in that, is this it? This should be outpost defences. Oh, we're miles away. There we go. So, I say this is sort of irrelevant in the sense that, having decided that outposts aren't the way to go for a base of this scale, the fact that the outpost defences didn't really work very well is sort of not really relevant. But as a general point, I must have the blueprints, have I? Yeah, here we go. So this thing, this little beauty, it's like, it seems like it's massively over-engineered, but it isn't. You know, it's the amount of defences. In fact, it's under-engineered because it doesn't actually withstand. So the idea of this was, when I was outposting, I would stick this down, and a train would come with however many artillery things it had on. Is it 6 or something? It turns up, and that's therefore like 600 artillery shells. They fire off in no time flat. And it just clears out, you know, an entire swathe of the bat. Oh, hello. Hi there, Grim. You alright? Hope you're doing well. What was I saying? Oh, yes, so the defences thing. So this thing was trying to cope with all of the response waves that come once you've done that. And it sort of does, but only if I have all the Spidertrons stood around it, firing rockets as well. If I leave this on its own, it wouldn't cope with all of the response waves from all that artillery clearing out of the thing. And it's another point around, you know, if I was expanding the base, I wouldn't even need that thing. And it's massively expensive in terms of resources. It made making the outposts a real grind and a slog, because I had to put that down. It took, like 10 minutes to build it. It took ages for the train to arrive, fire off all its shells. It took ages for the biters to respond to that. There are a lot of incidents where the artillery train ran out of shells, set off, and then crashed into some biters, because apparently a 1,000-ton train hitting a behemoth isn't going to kill it for some reason. And it was just a real grindy situation. And what makes that particularly troublesome is that whole issue that logistics robots, basically you can't put logistics robots into any chests using Spidertrons. I've had a couple of things where I thought I'd figured out a way of doing it, but you just cannot do it. It's just, I don't believe it to be possible. So either you've got to be there, to drop off some logistics robots, because basically it's like the inner ring is gun turrets as the fallback. And as I say, when it fails and they eat through all the power lines or something and it knocks off all the lasers, then it's the gun turrets that do the final defence. So you've got to have logistics bots there. And also when you pick it up again and lay down the next part of it, you've kind of got to have logistics bots in this system. So where I was hoping it would let me be completely hands-off with building outposts, it just wasn't possible. And I would have had to have a more complicated system where it drops off logistics robots as well. So maybe the artillery train had some logistics bots on it or something like that. But as I say, it just wasn't... I just couldn't get it to work independently. So I've basically handmade every single outpost. Whereas if I was expanding the walls, it wouldn't have mattered, basically. It would just be... That was pretty much automated. Once I'd set that up, I could just leave that doing its thing, because all of the material was just coming from the central base. But anyway, the actual point I was going to make was that even though feeding the logistics in for the gun turrets, I should have relied much more on gun turrets, because lasers, there was like 1.5 gigawatts of lasers on the final base. And it's a massive amount of power just sat there doing nothing. And gun turrets are like completely passive until a biter comes in. And I think I should have used gun turrets like as basically the almost exclusive way of doing things, because you don't have to power them at all. And they're massively effective against all of the biters. You're in Lucius Day, so a little tired now. How are you? I'm doing well. I've unfortunately got a cold, so if my voice sounds a bit weird, and I have to like clear my nose and stuff every so often. I unfortunately picked up a cold. It's not a bad one. I don't feel too bad, but my original plan. I mean, it's taking all stream anyway. I'm just rabbiting on and on and on, going through all the the post-mortem stuff. But I may well not stream tomorrow, because I was going to start the No Spoon series, but I may well just skip it, because just because I've got a cold and I'm not sure I can be bothered. But yes, I'm not too bad. So I just all a bit sort of bunged up and nasal and unpleasant sort of thing. And it's apologies for any biological noises going on. Yes, so I say I should have relied much more on gun turrets. They're way more effective and useful than I mean, they obviously have logistics issues. You've got to get the ammo out to them, but that's not that difficult. Lasers, the problem is the power, and particularly if you're outposting, this whole thing that biters turn up and just eat your power lines and stop your trains and stuff is a complete nightmare. Just a complete pain in the bum. And once they've knocked out a power line, that takes off all the lasers. And so, guns are one of your best things to have. There's obviously flamers. Flamers are very effective, but they're really laggy, as in the sense that, they fire off a jet of fuel and it does kill biters, but only the ones like behind the ones in, of a wave. So they're really good for for back troops, but in terms of hitting initial troops, they're not that great unless you set up one of those mazes that they have to work their way through. Yes, my speedrun. For me, it will be an amazing speedrun, but for I think for proper speedrunning, it'll be a bit pathetic. But yeah, I'm going to try and do it in in the 8 hours for the no spoon achievement. But I'll probably not stream tomorrow. Try and recover a bit, and then we'll start that probably next week. So yeah, but the thing I hadn't realised is flame turrets are really laggy in terms of UPS as well. So they're laggy in terms of responding to biters, but they seem to have a real big chunk of UPS associated with them, and I don't really understand that. Right then, so. Okay, so the next one I was going to load up was number 9. So this one, this is quite early, and this was the one where I designed the trains. So I must... I should have loaded up the next one, I guess, because I bet that's... Oh, no, there we go. There we go. So this sort of thing, right, and the reason I was going to do... The reason I wanted to... It's a bit confusing going back and forth with inventory. The reason I wanted to show this one in particular, let's stamp this down. Oh my god, look how slow the bots are. Wow. Right, can I see it on here? Oh, here we go, look. This inserter is the wrong way around. Because this is an unloading station, right? So you can see all the other inserters are the other way around. Let's just turn them off because they're making a hell of a racket. But at some point when I was making this, I got one inserter, this one, oops, the wrong way round. And I never noticed. And literally, there is actually, if you go to the base now, I've actually picked it up, but I've forgotten to replace it. So there is an inserter the wrong way round, right? The other thing is this balancer is wrong. Okay, there should be another one there. And again, I did that literally, it must have been one of the first things I made. I mean, you can actually put it there as well. It doesn't sort of matter where it is, but there's basically one balancer, one splitter wrong on this. And I didn't notice that again until basically I'd launched a rocket, I think. The effect of this is to make the unloading uneven. So basically all of my trains were half. It was like the back half was emptying and way before the front half, because basically it would feed through the back half material before the front half. I say I didn't notice that. So the reason I wanted to sort of highlight this is what I need to do, and it's something I've always resisted, was use my blueprints. So basically come up with some standardized blueprints for me to use over and over again. And that may be like not a series, but some streams I do where I just design you know, my train system, and then I can just keep reusing the train system. Because when I found that error, this one in particular, I had to go back and redo all of the balances in the base. And so if I have some balances that, you know, or, I mean, balances aren't a great example, but, you know, some blueprints that are, right, well, this is how I do trains, and just reuse them game to game. Because what I do, although I really enjoy the designing side of it, right, but this is the same design I come up with every time anyway. I mean, it is fractionally different. I've unloaded, you know, I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 5 chests on it, on this particular variant. Whereas I sometimes have, you know, 6 chests, on how I do it. So, in a sense, it doesn't matter. And like I'm feeding these across here. Well, sometimes what I do is I have, you know, feed into the middle and one of these here sort of thing, and only unload on one side. So I do variants, but the variation is tiny. And really, I think I just need to come up with some blueprints that, you know, this is my design of trains. And one of the reasons and another thing that sort of hurt the Megabase is that obviously this is a 242 train, which is what I normally do. But then in the Megabase, I've switched over. Oh, you have, haven't you? What's happened there? Oh, there we go. How long was that gone for? What did I do there then? Sorry about that. That's basically... So I have... In OBS, you have scenes, basically, which is what this... So if I'll just flip to the BRAT back one. So that's a scene, it calls it. And it was set on the satisfactory scene. But I haven't touched that in ages. Anyway, so I'm not sure what you've missed there, but basically what I was showing... oh, maybe it was that. There's probably some shortcut key that lets me switch between scenes. Just after I sorted the wrong inserter on the loading station. Okay. There must be some shortcut I'm not aware of with OBS that lets it switch over, because I didn't click that, but it's switched to a different scene. So there must be like, you know, like Alt G or something, you know, some shortcut key. Huh, interesting. Yeah, so, I mean, you haven't missed anything then. But what I was basically saying is that if I have some standardised blueprints, then if I notice an error like that, then I'll just correct it, and it'll just be then used. It'll just be correct in every game I do forwards. And I wouldn't blueprint everything and turn it all into boring stuff, you know. You know, I wouldn't blueprint. You know, when I do this, make everything so I wouldn't blueprint that, because that's fun to do like that. But for example, maybe something like that I would blueprint. You know, the cracking or something like that, just so that I've got a one I can repeat. But certainly something like trains, you know, having a standard blueprint that I carry forward, which I know a lot of people do. That's not meant to be some amazing revelation of how to play Factorio. It's just not what I've ever done. Because I always felt it would take the fun out of the game, but as I say, it's not very fun to discover that you've put an inserter the wrong way around and your entire train system is not working properly. And yeah, so it's also hurt with the Megabase in that I've switched to 484, but I'm still using the same blueprints. And if I had a separate book with 484 type trains in, when I say I'm using the same book, so I'm using like these straight rails, and these are actually problematic for bigger trains because it doesn't fit in that unit there. And the idea, when I've been laying it out, I've put stations one train distance apart, but they're not, because that's a 484, that's a 242 train, that's not a 484 train. So really, there's a lot of stuff crammed together in the Megabase because I've just blindly reused that thing, whereas I should have a separate, book that is, blueprints for bigger trains, basically. The other thing I really need to work out is oil unloading. I tend to do this, where I'll put in multiple chests and pumps and all this sort of rubbish, and it just never works properly. So I really need to work out how to do fluids, and a lot of it I know / believe is circuit network stuff. Having pumps controlled by circuit networks that turn on, off and on, depending on what's in each tank and what's going on with the train. But I always just found, I find the fluid mechanics just so weird and nonsensible that I just, it's something I've sort of avoided because of that weirdness. But if I'm going to do really big bases again, I kind of need to get my head around it, I think. Next one is about the blueprints again, but we'll load up. Building outposts is number 33. So this is a slightly different point, but it's the same point, essentially, which is that I needed to work out. So what I should be doing, or what I tried to do, was modular outposts and modular systems, where basically, particularly with the outposts, if I can find them, got to be in here somewhere. Yeah, so I would have this basic, that's the rail bit of it. Yeah, so the blue bit that's overlapping. So that's right, and then I would stamp down this. But this is loading in for, a certain number of carriages. And there's a different one for loading in raw materials. And in particular, the defences side of it, I tried to build it so that I could just stamp down the same design over and over again. But the reality was, or the problem, the sort of question, the question ended up not being answered was, it becomes quite complicated. So this is built with the idea that the resource patch would be here. So the iron ore patch would be here. And then I build this on the side of the iron ore patch. And that's fine, so long as the iron ore patch is there. But if, for example, well, here you go. So if I was trying to mine this iron ore patch, how do I do this, build this around this iron ore patch? Well, in order to do that, you see, because it can only rotate, you can't flip when you've got signals in rail things, right? So, because the ideal thing would be to build the actual rail side on here, because it's a nice bit of space. You can sort of add in the, smelters there, fine and dandy, or to flip it over and here, so the train load, the actual train, would be here, and actually rather than the resource patch be on this side, resource patch is on that side, and you just flip it over. But you can't flip when you've got signals for trains. So you can only rotate, right? So the only way you would be able to orientate that to get that patch would be to either have it upside down. Would that be right? Yeah, upside down. So the train would come out of the top, right? Or, maybe have it here, in which case the train would be... Oh, I can't do the rotation in my head. The train would be wanting to come out of here. In which case you've then got to do a load of land filling on the water, or you've got to take the train all the way round, or, so it becomes quite complicated to put it down. And I've obviously design the defences so that they are extendable a bit, and you can do the corner further over. But what ended up happening every time was that this blueprint to put down this, because what it's based on is we've got this corner, let's just then extend the rest of the box around the resources. But if this isn't exactly positioned exactly here, then I had to put the defences down bespoke each time, and that pretty much happened on just about every single outpost. And so I would either need a whole set of blueprints for different orientations of outposts, or the other solution is not to do outposts basically, so just extend the walls again, and then you can just put them wherever and it doesn't matter. But yeah, I found a lot of the outposts particularly, and if you look at this, I haven't unveiled a lot of the map yet, so I don't know that the outposts aren't as big as I want them to be until you get over here somewhere. So I ended up with needing a lot of outposts to get the sort of materials I needed, as well as having to bespoke design each one each time. And I think basically modular is good, but it would require me, as I say, to come up with a lot of blueprints that I reuse for game to game, which that would be quite a fun job to do. But when you're trying to do it as part of a series where you build a megabase, that's a lot of work and a lot of time to spend. I'll load up the save, but I've already mentioned this loads and loads of times. Basically, the whole question of going for outposts versus expansion. And I know this is particularly relevant to you, Grim, in that you're talking about the numbers and the scale and the size and that sort of thing. And I think you said you were wanting to do factory towns? City blocks, rather. That's taking a long time to load up, isn't it? Are we good? Yeah, there we go. And basically, I think that's a good design philosophy. I think that can work quite well. But this approach of outposting, unless you're turning biters off, in which case the entire planet is kind of your base and you don't have to defend yourself. But I would say if you're going for the 5,000 that you're looking at, don't do it with outposts. Expand the walls. I say if you've got biters on, expand the walls of your base rather than going outposting, because outposting was good and would work and works for the red and the green because you don't need that much. But it was purple when I realised, it took me literal days to clear out all the biters, to put in all the outposts, particularly since you have to move the materials back and forth. Move the materials out there. And let's say, you already said you were going to do it, but bump up the material richness basically, and reduce the amount of water and things like that, because one of the reasons we've got so much land to be recovered is because the patches aren't really that great until you get quite far out. Someone's getting trashed. And so this approach, even though as you see it's costing some robots, where basically you just expand your base, is way, 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 way better. And particularly the thing I've been saying about, you can do this completely remotely. Once you've got a good set of blueprints, this is just a remote job. You just plop them down, using a blueprint from far away, and it just expands your line a bit. You come back, and I did manually do it. I was spamming in shells because I quite enjoy that, but it's just completely automated, once you've got it sort of set up properly. And the time it took me to do all of this together. In fact, the gold is actually probably better example. You know, I reclaimed this section, which isn't that big, but it meant because it was now inside my borders, I could exploit every single patch, or pretty much. There wasn't the question of, well, is it worth exploiting a patch with 3.6 million on? You know, for all of the defences and all of the rubbish I would have to put on, when I could just, you know, run some belts over to here sort of thing, and have one collection there. So yeah, when you get really big, expanding your borders is the way to go. And with city block, that's kind of what you do anyway, as I understand it. You work within the city blocks, so you know it's sort of inherently part of that way of play. But yeah, I say if you're going for the 5,000, well, if you turn biters and pollution and stuff off, then it sort of doesn't matter because you know you're not having to deal with walls. Because the other issue, I mentioned this before, the other issue with how I've done it is this rail system is like two rail systems tagged together, in that it's a rail system that supplies, you know, artillery and shells and bots and stuff to the outpost, which is this outer lane. But it also brings the materials in for the actual science build. And that means that, and I actually had it when I left it running to build the solar, it all got messed up. I'd done some testing with the science and it all got log jammed and traffic jammed. And it was this combination of the fact that this train line is not set up to handle 484 trains, and it's also got both military trains running along that track and science material trains running along that one, and they got in each other's way and the whole thing ground to a halt basically. This entire bottom half of the base was just a train jam basically. Now one of the things that was great about that is the temporary station systems that you use, that you can use to, you know, get trains out of the way, was a massive help with unjamming it. But it still took me about 4 hours to unjam all the trains here. Luckily, it didn't impact the solar because it was, you know, log jammed here rather than, you know, the train jam stopped there basically. So yeah, I would say you either turn them off altogether, or if you're playing with them on, do base expansion rather than outposts. I mean, obviously, you know, do it whichever way you want, but you do you. But I say, my advice would be to go just expand your base all the time. I mean, I guess you could do a hybrid in that you could have, because there is this thing that patches get richer. There is an argument to say, right, well, build your main base and then transport everything over to a new base over here and expand in this section, because then you're dealing with, you know, bigger patches full stop. So there is that argument, I think. But yeah, I think expansion was the way to go. You know, I finished all of these off in sort of 10 episodes. Well, like the equivalent of, you know, 10 streams, whereas this took like 15 streams. It was that sort of scale of difference, really. The last one. Let's load this one up, if it will. I think this is the one I broke earlier on. Oh no, that's okay. But this is the one with coal liquefaction in it for space science. We're going to load. No. Come on, you can do it. It's basically got. Oh, there we go. It's basically got the coal liquid. Oops. Oh. It's got the coal liquefaction build in it. Here we go. I really love this build. I think it looks awesome. It's actually pretty efficient. unfortunately, I did make an error in that I've got 3 of them, and I only actually needed 2. It was because what I did, I got confused that how I'd done the maths, in that, because you need obviously plastic for satellites as well. And what I thought I'd done is I'd calculated the numbers just for the rocket builds and forgotten about satellites, and so I added an extra one in to provide plastic for satellites, but I hadn't. So I actually 2 of these would provide enough plastic for all of the builds. So it runs weirdly because there's far too much production for the amount of demand, but that's a separate issue. But yeah, coal liquefaction I think is awesome. It's what I much prefer over. Obviously, you can't use it for lube. That's a particular problem, but it's just way simpler, because every single fluid, with the exception of lube, can basically be made from. I suppose rocket fuel is slightly different, but ultimately rocket fuel is okay because you can make it basically from all of the fluids. So you can have as much cracking and stuff as you want, because it's all going to end up as rocket fuel, if you see what I mean. But lube is the only problematic one, because you've got to find some other use for all of the materials. Is Spidey doing a little jig? You've got to find some other use for the other materials, otherwise it grinds to a halt, because it all just backs up. But yeah, basically every other. So plastic. Plastic is great with coal liquefaction, because it is literally, all coal. So how much plastic do you produce? So do you mean over? Unfortunately, at the end I'll load up. We can go through I went through the numbers at the very beginning, but I didn't actually look at plastic. We can load up the. In fact, I'll load up the final base again, and we can have a look at the stats again, and I can show you sort of all of the numbers. But I don't remember offhand how much plastic is overall produced at this stage. And say this isn't items. It's not running at this point, basically. So there's only 13,000, 14,000 a minute being produced, 140,000. But all time stats at this point, it's 126 million. But so we can load up the final base later on, and in fact that's where we need to end up. But yeah, so basically, coal liquefaction for me is just sort of a godsend, really, because I say everything can be made from it apart from lube. Even lube can be made from it, and in fact it's better because you get more heavy oil. But the only tricky part is, finding something else to do with light oil and petroleum. And of course you've got that problem with oil anyway. It's not like using oil gets rid of that problem. So say coal liquefaction is just excellent from my point of view. I think I would still mix it up and use both, but I say for me it's just like I far prefer it, because the only point you're having to deal with fluids with coal liquefaction is when you're feeding it into chemical factories. So it's only going short distances, and you're not. You see, the big thing I hate with fluids is the trains. Is that whole, what I was saying earlier, of unloading it and loading it into trains is just, I just hate it. It's just because it doesn't work in any sensible way. And you have to get really good unloading, you have to use circuit networks, and that's not right for me. Sorry, Mr. Beginner, that would be great. Yeah, we'll circle back basically to the thing. I'm just trying to load up ones that are trying to make it a bit more interesting than just me talking, which I appreciate. This is just me talking, but right, we're almost there. Last section is about the power. And I thought I might load up this one where I started making the nuclear stuff. I really enjoy playing with the nuclear. I mean, just to note, I mean, if you did want, you know, the general roundup, eventually this will go up on my YouTube channel. So if you really did just want to, you know, watch all of that, where I went through those numbers, but ask me at the end for, you know, what you want to see. But I say the VOD will go up, and it was only like 20 minutes or something running through the numbers, so those are there. But yeah, I really enjoy the nuclear process, you know, Kovrax and all that sort of stuff. And what I found, because this is me just starting to make it, isn't it? I've not actually made a nuclear power yet, but I really like the combination of coal liquefaction and a small nuclear build for making train fuel. I do this all the time, and I really enjoy setting this up because it has the advantage that you're bringing in coal for your factory anyway, and I really love the sort of neatness of going from feeding coal into all the trains to feeding coal into coal liquefaction and turning it into, you know, rocket fuel and then into nuclear fuel and then feeding it into the trains. I really like that little loop. But yeah, I say nuclear power, I kind of found that actually it's not as sort of bad as everyone sort of says, as in the amount of sort of UPS, you know, sort of drain for nuclear wasn't actually that as bad, because the impression that's given is it's horrendous and that you just can't run a base on nuclear when it gets to a certain size and all that sort of stuff, and it's just not true, I don't think. Particularly not, I think maybe if you had big long pipes, you know, if you had, say if all the nuclear was built here and I was running all the water over, that might be a bit more difficult. But if you do nuclear islands like I did, where literally the water is just, you know, coming out of the lake and going straight into the heat exchangers, I don't think it's that big a problem. And particularly, I mean, I had this entire lake, top lake, was, you know, filled with 2x2 nuclear, which is not that efficient, you know. I think if you went with like a 2x8 array or something like that, I think you could probably get a very long way with running your base that way. I mean, I think eventually you probably would have to, you know, either go combination or switch to solar eventually. But I say I don't think, you know, solar, because what I did basically during the week is I loaded up the file, like deleted all of the solar. I actually blew it up because it was quite fun. Nearly crashed my machine, which is what I was going to do it in this, but it just completely died. And the UPS after all the explosions had gone, it wasn't that much better. So yeah, I don't know that it's that costly. I suppose there's a lot of ancillary stuff going on. There's a lot of processing and trains and all that sort of stuff. So maybe that's you know, that should be added into the equation. But say I think you probably could run, you know, a 5,000, 5K megabase on nuclear if you did some good nuclear designs. I don't think it would be as bad as everyone seems to think it is. Yeah. Certainly, one of the things I would certainly say about it is the fact that I had to make, 1.4 million solar panels and still wasn't able to run the base, versus having maybe, say, 20 nuclear arrays. The amount of time that's going to save you, is that maybe worth sacrificing, 5 UPS or something? It's something to think about, What I would say, though, is for this base, to make all of those solar panels, a dedicated solar factory is an absolute, necessity. So, one I was going to load up, I think we loaded this one up before. So I think this is one where I'd put down the solar factory. I don't think it's here, but there is so but yeah, well, I put down this here, right? And I thought, I'd walled this bit off, and I thought, right, we'll put in solar panels here, and that'll run the base. So what's this? This has got 7,000 solar panels in it. So if that's that, what's that? That's going to be like 15. So it's 15 across there, say 30, call that 35, 70. So maybe that would have been, 100,000 solar panels or something in there. No, it's probably more than that. It's probably like 250,000 or something. But you get my point, that I thought if I fill this in, that'll run the entire base. I was so wrong, it's almost comical. In fact, should we load it up now? Because it takes a while. Yeah. I was so wrong, it was comical. And this sort of feeds back into these points I was saying about I should have done more preparation, I should have looked at the numbers more. One of the things I would say about like Factorio Lab Calculator is it mustn't include beacons, because it was telling me that like 12 gigawatts of power would be enough to run all of the machines. I have 1.2 million solar panels, and like that's like, what is it, 50 odd like gigawatts. So it can't include the beacon. Now it makes sense because they couldn't. How would they work out your overlap? Not every single machine actually has 12 beacons. They share beacons. But yeah, those sorts of numbers are just nowhere near what you actually need that it gives you. So that wasn't a very good guide to the power requirements. But I thought I would fill this in and would be good to go. And in reality, the solar is what? It's this big, is it? Something like that. In fact, we'll load it up. It does take a while to load. Where is it, symmetry? It'll probably go on about, signals on load. Enable, yeah. It's not frozen up, is it? I'm still live. Yeah, it'll take a while to load this up, because what it's actually doing every time, because it's a mod called Byte Has Begun, and it turns off byters every single time and deletes them. So it'll take a long while to run through. Roadplay, thank you very much. Still live. Thanks for confirming. But say this will take a little while to, because what it's doing, it's going through the entire map, deleting all the byters each time you load it, which is not very efficient really. But there we go. So that's us loaded up. Yes. So the actual solar panels is that. So the previous one that I mentioned, that I showed, was that area, I think, wasn't it? Something like that. And I thought I would fill that in, and that would be all the solar panels we would ever need. And this is not enough solar panels to run the base. It's just bonkers. It doesn't run the base because military is switched off. All of these out here I've switched off. I had to delete all of the beacons in the main base to free up power. It does not run the base. So if you're going 12 beacon and you're going, over 5,000 science, you can make gains from not having military and deleting biters and all that sort of stuff. But you are going to need millions or over 1 million solar panels if you want to run it with solar. It's that's just the maths, because I don't know that these could get any more efficient, really, because even though I've said I would probably do centralized steel smelting, it's you're still going to need an enormous amount of steel and steel production, to feed all of your different steel builds. So it wouldn't, if I centralised steel production, it wouldn't be about having less smelters. It would be about not having to feed belts round through a million tiny little gaps that becomes impractical. That's what I would save by centralising steel production. And green circuits and things like that. You still need a very large amount of production. And indeed, if you centralise them, you kind of need more, because you've then got a lot of stuff sat on trains at very high density, and filling a train with steel is like a hell of a lot of iron plate to do that. So, you kind of need more in order to account for the lags effect, where basically, if I'm making steel here, it is getting fed straight into the things that's using it. Whereas if I've got a steel factory over here, the fact that the train is going to take all the time to get over to the build means that you've got to have more production to account for that time lag. So, as I say, actually, you wouldn't have less steel smelters if you centralise the build. You'd probably have more. It's just it simplifies like the logistic side of it, because you are just taking a massive dump of material and transferring it around. But yeah, so you could probably get away with less with a different way of doing it and turning off biters and those sorts of things. But if you're going this big, you need a lot of solar panels. That is to say, how long did that take to build? By the way, love the long trains. So basically, if I do the time thing again, so the base has been running for 26 days, 10 hours, 26 minutes and 19 seconds. In reality, there was a lot of downtime or time where I left things. So this is one of the things I was saying sort of earlier on. Actually, at the very end, I cheated in that I used creative mode and I added in a load of solar panels. And obviously, I've cheated by turning the biters off, technically. But that was because when I made this section of the solar panels, it was all being produced by this here. So these machines have made all but 200,000 of my solar panels and accumulators. And it's nowhere efficient and fast or good enough to do that in a sensible time. So what I actually did, there was basically one night, I set the base going and it built 200,000 solar panels. So, like about 10 hours, no, it's more than that, probably 12 hours of that is just it producing solar panels for this. What I should have done is made an entire solar panel dedicated build to produce them at a much higher rate and much more efficiently. Because what I've been saying is, so what I kept doing, like the reason I fired up that previous save was, I thought that would be enough solar panels. And I was way wrong. And so then I added a bit more and thought, well, that'll be enough. So I don't need to build a solar factory because, all I'm doing is going to add a bit more. But then I had to add even more. And then I had to even more. So at some point I should have realised and said, no, proper dedicated solar panel factory. Let's get that done. That'll save me loads of time in the long run. But every time I got to a point of, thinking I was done, I needed 100,000 more solar panels. So, I say, now that I know, that's a lesson learned. But if you are going to give something like this a go, learn that lesson already and build that properly from the beginning. Wind energy. One of the things I would like to see more variety in the power, I must say. It's sort of, I don't know that, because one of the things, obviously there's the expansion coming. Oh, by the way, so Graham, I don't know if you're still around, but if you've got any questions, so this is the final base. It is running. We are doing science. So if you wanted to see any of the numbers, just shout what you're most interested in, because I can fire up the production stats. Because we're looking at this all before. So I've made 1.4 billion cables, for example, throughout this base. But yeah, I mean, I did have, so my sort of end bit, Oh, I guess the other point, and I've sort of said it, is that 12 beacon for very high science per minute is basically impractical, because the reason I've got so many solar panels is because the beacons is just insane. It is absolutely, whoops, absolutely bonkers. I mean, that's beacon power demand. That's everything else. So, as I say, if you add all of that together, it's only about half the amount for the beacons. So everything at 12 beacons is, well, unless you've got like infinite time that you don't mind spending, as to do a sensible build for 5,000, I don't think 12 is the way to go. And I stuck religiously to it, and that was a mistake. I think a lot of places 8 beacons is more than fine, and actually is helpful. More green. Yeah, I suppose that would be a way to go, wouldn't it? To have the trouble with green modules is you either need to put them in the machine. So one of the things on the production stats is if you look at the. So everything's got three. Got the maximum number of prod modules in, and you see this difference between. So I've used 750 million iron ore, but I've produced 882 million iron plate, and that's because of prod modules. So when you start putting efficiency modules in machines, you obviously lose that boost. But also, you can put efficiency modules in beacons, but it's counterproductive because, well, I think you can do it with level 1 efficiency is sort of where it works, but the combination of the amount of material that you put into an efficiency module and the fact that it needs to sit in a beacon that demands a lot of power makes them basically redundant. So you say you can put them in the machines, but you lose the free stuff basically. And yeah, I suppose maybe there's a crossover point where it becomes like actually the prod modules are not as good as having efficiency modules for a certain size, because that reduces your power demand enough that the fact that you get free stuff is less important. Efficiency modules are UPS counterproductive since you would even more production as well. Yeah, so you would need, because you would need, so if these, and I went with 8 in the end, but technically you need 9, 12 beacons with prod modules to fill a belt. So yeah, you'd need like a couple more, and of course then you've got to put beacons around them as well. So I think actually it's more sensible to do 8 beacon builds. It also 8 is much more compressed as well, and you like save space. Because you can have all the machines basically next to each other. So yeah, I think 8's really the way to go. I was saying before, I would still do 12 beacon for steel. I think that's sufficiently slow that actually 12 beacon is beneficial. And probably something like, well, obviously these, I would do satellites, I would do max beacons on still. I think this is sufficiently beneficial. Is that steel run the whole 5,000 sites per minute, like 2,000? Yeah, so let's have a look. So, production. Let's do it over 10 minutes, gives a better average. So, all this base is doing is science. It's not doing military science, because I had to turn that off. I didn't have enough power to support that. So to make the 5,000-ish, some of them are a bit faster, some are a bit slower. These are the numbers of stuff that's being produced instantaneously. So I've done it with 10 minutes, so it's bit of an average, in fact, because, yeah, you're getting some wobbliness with the hour. Let's do the 1 minute. So, in terms of steel, you need 48,000. So, these are all the 12 beacon numbers, so it does change if you go to 8. Just because of the maths gets different, basically. But yeah, we've got 48,000 a minute steel. Is that right? Do you have the hour? Yeah, 49,000 over the hour. Yeah, 48,000 a minute over the steel. So we get more wobbliness when we do at the shorter range. Let's do the hour numbers. Or would I be better with a 5 second? Let's look at the steel this way. So is that... I never know how to read the short number ones. Because that's like the average across 5 seconds, is it? Because those are a factor of 10 out. And then that goes back to 47,000. I guess because that's per minute rate, isn't it? And that's only 5 seconds. So if we look on the 1 minute, they are basically the same. Yeah, so we got 48,000 steel. You wanted to have like a plastic as well, didn't you? So we got 89,000, well, 88,000, shall we call it, plastic. So there's a fly in the room. 88,000 plastic a minute. And I say this is purely running the science. There is no, if you add in, probably able to see other production spikes maybe. So these are the tests basically. When I've been testing it, it spikes up to this. So this is like the production, as I say, when it's running properly. And then these are like the productions when I'm just building everything, making red circuits. What else is an interesting? I guess something like green circuits is worth looking at. Oh, it doesn't call them that, does it? Well, let's look at all the circuits. Oh, it calls them processing units, doesn't it? For blue. Is it processing? Processing unit. Yeah, processing units. So blue circuits we're at about 6,000 per minute. Circuits. And we've got 192,000 green circuits and 40,000 red circuits a minute. I could potentially make this save file available. The only thing, I mean, what... I sort of broke this save file when I was doing the cheat of slapping in the solar panels. I used creative mode and I enabled all cheats. And what it does is it turns on... So I haven't got... It's only running at, 30 UPS, so he should be trickling along. Oh, actually... No, he's too fast, isn't he? Let's have a look at Spider, John. Where are you? Yeah. Actually, that's interesting, because I don't... It's not far off default speed, I think. But when you're in creative mode, it gives you, like, speed boosts to your walk speed. And it must do it by editing the file. Because when I was messing up, when we were doing streaming last week, I was going super fast. But it looked like I was going normal speed because the game was running at half speed. UPS doesn't affect the character. Maybe. I always thought it did, because your FPS can't go above your UPS. Oh no, it's the other way around, isn't it? Your UPS can't go above your FPS. So yeah, maybe you're right. Right, yeah, maybe that's the issue. But basically, so if I put on them, I'm going stupidly fast. But I say it's not. I'm pretty sure you do run slow when your UPS drops. What else we got? Creative is great. Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say with the creative is, so what I have is a test map, separate test map. It's not actually the same as this, which was a mistake. It should have been the same seed, but because then I would have known how big I needed everything to be. But anyway, I would say transfer them over with blueprints. I wouldn't edit, unless you don't mind, generally. But if you want to keep your sort of main, Megabase save sort of pure, use blueprints to transfer things over. Because if you do like I did and think, right, well, I'll load up creative and, do a bit and then turn it off again. The cheats are, some of them are permanently applied by the looks, from what I can tell. So I've not got any legs on. There you go. So he's got a set of legs on. And I'm faster than him. And it should be the other way around. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of... You can create a scenario from a save to keep them separate. Yeah, it's a good idea, actually, yeah. Yeah, make a separate branch, as it were. Branch it off. And I know there's also the editor, isn't it? I can never remember what the command is, but there's the actual built-in editor. But if you do that, that also disables the achievements, which you may not care about. But I guess we could look at these as well. So I've kind of gone through everything that I wanted to do. Basically, I've been through, I sort of rounded up my thoughts. The big things are 12 beacons is not practical. Outposts is fine if you're going relatively low sites per minute, but when you get up to sort of 5,000, you're better off expanding your base, from the centre. If you don't enjoy biter combat, then, just get rid of them to start with, because you will be doing a lot of biter combat, like a ridiculous amount. But yeah, so these are all the bonuses I've ended up with. I think I'm up to about 60, is it? 64 mining prod. So basically all the patches are virtually infinite by now. What else we got? 1,220% damage on the old shells. And so I took all of these up to about 15, was it? Oh, 16 by the looks of things. So they're massively boosted. Oh, you mentioned the train. The trains are 484 trains. I think this is good. I think 484 is a way to go. I wish I'd done my outposts as, excuse me, as not loops, because that actually caused some problems with trains trying to path round the loops. But I wish I'd stuck to my guns of, in and out type trains. But yeah, I really like these 484s. I think they work really well. They're super quick and they carry a heck of a lot of stuff. What else might be interesting? I guess we could look at the power again. Sort of gone over it already, but oops. If we get rid of those two, so nuclear, as I say, was actually quite good. I'm not sure that the reports of nuclear killing a game are not probably a bit over exaggerated. Because even with my sort of rubbish 2x2, I ended up getting 16 gig out of them, and you could get a lot more with a much better design. I guess we could also have a look at... That's the steam engines. This is where I was burning all that oil to make lube. What I ended up doing... It's just a silly thing here. Here we go. So I ended up converting... Basically, I got to a point where all I needed was blue belts. But blue belts, of course, you need lube for. And there was nothing... I didn't have anything to do with the rest of... because lube's made out of heavy. and I didn't have anything to do with the petroleum and light oil, so I just started sticking it in boilers basically and burning it all off. And that, I mean, that's one of the things I would do. I need, I say, I need really a bus system that works with a Megabase, and that was a big problem. If I wasn't running science, I kept running out of lube, and that's not ideal. It should really, balance out a bit better, or at least have some way of getting rid of, oil that is better. What I could probably have done is basically had something like the trains load on petroleum rather than heavy oil and deliver that to the, to the walls. That might have been a good way to get rid of it. Spelly says, when my computer is done, I think I'm going to try making a vanilla Megabase too. I say I would, yeah. I mean, I kind of don't. I think I did say earlier about I would go richer patches and that sort of thing. If you go vanilla, I would probably do some tweaks with the biters, like even if you leave them on, I would probably turn them off actually. But if you leave them on, maybe turn the evolution factor down or turn pollution off or something like that, because it just makes it so. Or go for a lower science per minute. A lower science per minute vanilla, I think, is perfectly good and viable and doable. It's only when it gets to this ridiculous level that bigger patches are the way to go. It's just. Particularly, I'll be honest. I mean, if you look at all this solar, look at all the resource it's covering up. There's got to be, 100 million copper hidden under that patch? Well, I could have used all of that to make the solar panels, Whereas if it was a couple of bigger patches, you could justify having, a hole in your, your coverage to grab that copper and turn it into solar panels. Want to try a two-way rail system with a single-headed trains. Not sure if it's going to work. Okay. Two-way rail system, single-headed trains. I mean, single-headed, basically you're into roundabout territory. I've been playing the game. So, I mean, that's what these are. So these are actually. You see, I've done a weird thing. Basically, the outposts. These are single-headed train stations because it's a loop, basically. So a train comes in here. Here's the stacker. And depending on what it's doing, it goes in, fills up, and goes out again. And I did this partly because I didn't know how big everything was going to be. But basically, it's effectively a loop then. So it goes round and loops round and comes out again. But I'm a sufficiently sort of long in the tooth player that when we used to have loops before, trains would just randomly decide to try and turn round in a station, and it would just cause a traffic jam. And you'd go to the station, and you'd be like, "Why is my stone brick train trying to turn round at this state? Why is there a stone brick train sat at this stacker? What the hell's going on?" And I say it was because there wasn't the pathing was just like, well, that's the closest path, go through there. And they have done a lot to fix a lot of that. So the penalty for going through stations is quite huge. And so basically, a train sort of going round saying, right, well, where do I want to go to get stuff, is probably not going to go through one of these type loops. So, I think those types of systems do work. There is one thing, I mean, I still wouldn't really use them because roundabouts are really difficult to do and really difficult to do well. They're just not, and if you can build without roundabouts, then you'd be okay. But I just really always struggle with roundabouts as a junction type. They're just really hard to get right and efficient. And you'll see in this entire base, it's like there's no. I think there's like 2 four-way junctions or something, because you want to avoid as many complicated junctions as you can. That's just like the general thing, general rule to stick by. I use left-hand drive basically because I'm British and we drive on the left in this country, and whenever I've tried to do right-hand drive, it just breaks my brain. So I just sort of have to do left-hand drive because I just can't get my head around right-hand drive. It also, I always use the excuse as well that it puts the signals inside the tracks like that. So if you have right-hand drive, you have to have them outside. It's a rubbish excuse, but I like to have an excuse. Do I use two-way right-hand drive setup? Two-way rail systems were both rails allow both directions going to. Oh, both rails allow both directions. Wow. Okay. Crikey. Factorio UPS single core limited. I don't think. I think so. One of the things just to note, my system specs are not great. So, as in this machine, it's actually a 7700K. So, it's like 5 generations old. When I 7700. When I built it, it was basically like as good as you could get, sort of thing. But you're talking like 8 years old, if not more, something like that. So it's a good machine that I'm not saying anything against. And I would have, if we weren't going through the whole chip crisis, I would have built a new one, like 2 years ago. But so chip crisis plus pandemic meant I just put that plan on hold basically. So it's not the most efficient build. I can't actually bring it up for you, but because I haven't got the thing. But no, I mean it's running on all. It is multi-threaded, and it is running on. How can I bring that up? All threads. Oh, resource monitor. CPU. Yeah, so it is multi-threaded. It is running across all threads, but yeah, as I understand it, RAM is one of the biggest limitations with it, rather than sort of the actual CPU itself. But what I'm saying is because it's so old, the RAM isn't as it's quite slow effectively. I have a lot of RAM to kind of compensate. I got about 64 gigs, I think, but yeah, the speed is only like 2000 megahertz. A thing I would say about UPS though, in my experience, is people sort of worry about it too much, and particularly in terms of the savings you can make. It's like I deleted all this, testing it out. This is the nuclear stuff. It didn't actually make that much difference. The thing that really canes the UPS is the rockets for me. So launching these rockets, basically I can do all of the other sciences at 5,000 a minute with everything running, and it runs at 60 UPS. But as soon as it starts launching rockets, it drops down to at least 35 UPS. And I say it's just a reflection of the fact that basically when white science turns on, it effectively doubles everything that's happening. There's twice as much going on when white science is running, and I don't believe I don't think the rockets are that well optimized, if I'm honest. Hoping to get more train options. I want to be able to use the circuit networks to change the train stop name. 77,000 yourself. Well, 3930k, right? Crikey. that is a mm, that is a while off. But yeah, I mean the game is the optimization is amazing, really, when you think about it. I mean it's still playable at this sort of speed. It's not great, but you can still sort of get away with it. And as I say, if I turn the science off and like leave it for an hour to cope, it goes right back up to 60 UPS, and I can do stuff. You know, so it's not. In fact, it's doing that now because there's no science running. It's just, excuse me, building up all the buffers. You know, once eventually these are all full up again, I'll be able to play at 60 UPS again. So, you know, it's sort of, it's not impractical to have a base like this and sort of play with it. And one of the things, I mean, like artillery and stuff is actually big UPS, and I've taken out all of the flamer turrets because they're weirdly heavy on UPS. But things like I could take out all the radars because I don't need to see any of this stuff anymore. If I was to keep playing with this, there are some fixes I would do for the blue and purple. But yeah, it's sort of, you know, there isn't a lot more I could really do. I mean, I guess in theory, some of these outposts, these patches would run out. But you know, I would keep doing the thing. Oh, what I was going to do. So just to finish off, there was a couple of things I was going to say about. So I mentioned these throughout various streams, and they're things I would like to see them put into vanilla. I don't think they'd be game breaking. Or anything like that, and they're actually fairly simple. So the first one was some way of boosting radar range, because radars are like perfectly, the coverage is perfect for the normal game, but when you get to this scale, you're having to put down, and as I say, they are quite UPS intensive, but you're having to put down quite a lot of radars to not be able to see very much. So like this build, the purple build, for example, I think there's like 6 radars on this in order for me to be able to see it and see it running. And that's a bit silly. So I would like to see, basically, and I know there are mods that do a lot of these, but in vanilla, that one of the white sciences, one of the infant sciences, or, well, there's another, yeah, so one of the white sciences is like a radar range boost. And that way they could make it sufficiently expensive that, you know, you couldn't have, if you wanted one radar to cover your entire base, you'd have to spend, you know, 1 billion white science or something, so they could, you know, control it that way. Or very simply, a level 2 radar, and that is just like double the coverage, and that then just lets you put down one radar and you can see your entire science build sort of thing. Because the radar ranges are just too small. And one of the reasons I mention that in particular is when you're trying to put down. So I designed this in creative mode. This is purple science, this. And so transferred it over with a blueprint. And it was impossible to work out where I was putting this, because if you zoom in close enough to be able to see what's going on, you can't see the edges of the build. And if you're this far out, you can't see the detail of what's going on. So a radar that would allow me to see, you know, that entire section would be massively helpful for putting down blueprints. And I mean, these are actually only just within a sort of radar, basically. The other option, as I say, is a level 2 bigger radar. And the other thing is that, yeah, there you go. You just said it. So what should happen is that radar. So when you launch a satellite, what is that doing? You know, it's giving you space science, but you're firing off a satellite. And I guess you could say it's doing some sort of research, you know, up in space, and that's giving you your space science. But it would be better if it like revealed a chunk of the map or something like that. And that basically, you know, either, or maybe it increased your, so maybe as a boost, a bonus to the white science, it increases your radar range or something like that. The only problem there is, I have launched hundreds of satellites now. If we say, if we go all time science, so I've produced 8.6 million white science packs. So that's 4.3 million divided by 1,000. Is that 4,300 launches or 430? It must be 430 launches. Can't do the maths in my head. That's a hell of a lot of satellites to have launched. So if it had done, one extra square for a radar for every single satellite launch, I would be in the situation of one radar, unveils the entire map, which I think is a bit OP. But yeah, what I would like to see is that basically you launch a satellite and it reveals a chunk of the map, and you could maybe target it. You could maybe say, right, unveil that bit of the map or something like that. I'm not sure that would be particularly balanced. Maybe they'd have to have a maximum range to it or something, because you could reveal something over here, and then it would be updating a tiny little square, like a million miles away from your base. So they'd have to think about that. But I would love to see the launch satellites do something for you more than, or maybe it means you don't have to use you can permanently unveil a chunk of the map or something like that. What I'd ideally do is you pick a resource. You say you pick copper, and it reveals around the nearest copper patch that's not been revealed. But when you get this scale, that would get silly. Yeah, so I'd say I'd love to see rockets be a revealing thing. Obviously, if and when they do this expansion, is anyone else getting a bit worried that the expansion seems to have been a very long time with nothing happening? But if they do, obviously it could do stuff like, if they do the space expansion everyone thinks it is, it could reveal, and I've never played the mod, so I don't know if this is what it does, but it could reveal, meteors or something, or like another planet or something like that, for you to go and colonize, or maybe it, you use it to put orbital platforms up there or something like that. But it needs to have some better reason for launching rockets, I think, or more useful to it. The other one I would like to see is an increase to the bot's battery size as an infinite tech, or maybe a Mark II bot of some description, because bot speed is very, 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 very useful and is a great help, but has only a limited utility, because eventually you get to, there's like a maximum range that they get to, no matter what sort of speed boost it is, because the bot speed gets very, very expensive eventually. Anyway, so you slow down on those, and basically, again, with these gigantic builds, it's not enough to be able to, rely on the speed. They need to be able to hold more charge, I think, to really make use of the speed, and particularly, so it's a real pain in the bum when you've got, you've got this massive blueprint here. You stamp it down, your bots fly out at super speed and lay it all down. Then they come back and they suck every single bit of charge you've got out of you in seconds. And it's like, if they held a bit more charge, they could at least build a bit more before doing that. And that's where the other thing I would say is that the personal fusion reactor, there needs to be some kind of corresponding boost to the amount of power that produces, because the maximum consumption on these is 3.5 megawatts, and the maximum output of these is 750 kilowatts. So 4 fusion reactors doesn't actually even charge a single Mark II Roboport. And that's not right for me. That's a bit silly because, it's like we got Mark II Roboports. We never got a Mark II fusion reactor. There should be a Mark II fusion reactor or some way of tweaking up its power, basically. Considering this game started in 2013 or something, I'd say they're on track. I suppose there is that, but one of the things they did brilliantly, one of the great things was the Friday Facts. That kept us all sort of engaged, and interested, and it went through all sorts of different things and weird things, and all sorts of topics, and that was a brilliant means of communication. And interesting, and sometimes it was simple things, sometimes it was art, sometimes it was really complex programming things. And then when they've launched, version 1 and said, right, well, we're doing expansion, they just stopped that. So, give us a few more bones, to at least know. I mean, they haven't even said what it is, Thanks, Bob's Mods has 4-tier bot system. Top tier, you install a reactor and they never need to recharge. Oh, right, okay. No, tier's right. So, yeah, I mean, I say something like that. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, Bob's Mods is great for what it is. It's probably a bit too much for vanilla. I say I've never played it, so I'm speaking just on, what I've seen, as it were. But certainly something in vanilla. And I know they never really intended for the game to be people to making, 10,000 cents per minute bases and all this sort of stuff. But, they've optimized it such that you can. And surely the expansion is going to require you to do big science numbers. That's got to be what, how it works, hasn't it? I mean, it's got to be, if it's space expansion, it's got to be launching rockets and all that sort of stuff. So it's got to be big bases. So giving you a few more tools to make them viable just seems more sensible to me. And similarly, the other one would be, of course, a Mark II solar panel, And I know that's, they put nuclear in to give us a big power, small footprint option. But, a Mark II or a boosted solar panel just seems like a no-brainer to me. And again, I know there are mods that do a lot of these, but this is like vanilla that I would want to see. And like I say, they can make it really expensive for big bases. But yeah, some sort of better solar panel. Or as I think you said earlier, so like, wind power could come in. Or, I mean, you couldn't really do wave power, I don't think, but wind power could come in and just be like massively powerful but hugely expensive to make or something like that. I wish spiders were more like StarCraft Zerglings, buff them instead of making them bigger and launch hordes of them. Yeah, I mean, I've said before that biter combat just becomes a tedious, clicking exercise. The fact that they made the behemoth, the only thing I would disagree with it on is the whole thing that if a behemoth biter gets hit by a train, it may well not kill it. Even if it's a gigantic train going at super speeds because of nuclear fuel, gets hit by a train and it just shrugs it off, basically. And it's like, I can't remember how many shells it is, but it's like 5 artillery shells to kill a behemoth biter. It's just like, they did that wrong, I don't think that's what it should have been. Or it could have been, I mean, something like, and I don't think it would work because of like the computational complexity, but something more like in Warhammer 40k, where you have the Tyranids, basically. So you would have like the big behemoth biters would just buff, as you say, buff every other biter, but there's only like, they're very, very rare sort of thing. Or maybe they only spawn when a base is destroyed, and that's like meant to be the the alien mother that is inside the base or something like that. And that then just buffs all of the biters around it, so it gives you a more interesting challenge, because, they would all, the whole thing that they just rush at your defences, it's pretty boring eventually, and you would need something to pick off, the behemoth, because it could be, the behemoth could come up to your walls and stay out of range and just spawn biters at you or something. Like it was a base or something like that. So yeah, there are all sorts of interesting mechanics they could do. I don't think they could, because they are quite an impact on performance. And when you've got this volume of area full of biters, if it was too complicated, it would be horrendous. Yeah, bigger bugs. I say the behemoths are a pain. It's just like. And it's not a good pain. It's more, more of the same sort of thing. It's like the thing that, it'd be good that if instead of behemoths, just big, ugly biters, they got swimming biters. So suddenly we've got a defend across water, or burrowing biters that they go underground and they pop up somewhere in your base. But I do understand the thing that. The game isn't really about the tower defense aspect, and they're more intended as like a pressure on your early and mid game, particularly. But yeah, some of those in vanilla would be good, and particularly if they do space expansion, you could do something of like meteorites crashing into your base, and that then spawns a load of biters in the middle of your base or something. So yeah, there's a lot more they could do there. So the other one I had noted down was digging water, and I do get why this is not in the game, but the ability to just dig a trench would make things so much easier. And as I say, I do get the argument that if you put water digging in, because the biters can't cross the water, you would be able to just build a moat outside your walls and leave it be. The counters I would give to that argument is if I'd built that moat, it would have been here, and half of my base would be outside it already. So it wouldn't really be a solution as such, unless you know exactly how big your base has got to be. And even if you do, you're going to have to put bridges across the moats and all this sort of stuff. So it would be complex. And, if you're trying to defend a giant area, building a moat could be made super expensive. So, I'd want digging water in the vanilla game, but I don't have any problem with them saying, right, well, they cost each. So it's like a super cliff explosive, and each one costs 100 cliff explosives. So cliff explosives are already pretty expensive, really, and slightly difficult to produce. But in order to be able to dig a well, which is effectively what you're saying, you have to invest an enormous amount of resources. So you can use it to make a little pond for you to stick a pump in, but in building a moat would be the most ridiculously expensive thing you could imagine. Or another solution, and I do know this is in Bob's, you make a version 2 water pump that you can put anywhere, and it's a well. It's slightly bonkers to me that the engineer doesn't know how to dig a hole in the ground and make a well. I mean, what sort of engineer doesn't know how to dig a hole in the ground? That's just nuts. And so you can make it expensive or make it some single. They could be like a bit like in Satisfactory, where there's a water well resource. A geyser resource, something like that. Of course, that would just be randomly where you didn't want it, so that's not very good for solution for this game. But if you could just dig a well and stick a water pump on, I think that would make it a lot simpler and easier, because, as I say, it's just bonkers to me that, I've had to run pipes across from some random bit of water to get across to here, because apparently the engineer doesn't know how to build a well. so that's the other one I would do in vanilla. So I think I would like improved biters and different biters and that sort of stuff. I fully understand why it isn't, so I wouldn't definitely want to see that in the game. But yeah, that would be fun. Noxus, I say there are loads of mods that sort of do, a lot of these things. It's just say I think I would like to see a handful of them in vanilla just to help this process along a little bit. Megabase scale, like you said, biters become tedious. Maybe there needs to be a way to end them permanently in vanilla. Yeah, I mean, that's the other I mean, because one of the things I would say about... I'm going way beyond when I normally would, but it's good to chat to you guys. The thing I would say about the map generation is because it uses the Perlin noise thing, it's kind of boring and very, very samey. One of the mods I like to play with is the alien biomes, because it just adds I don't think it really works very well, if I'm totally honest, in terms of generating sort of terrain that looks like actual terrain, but it at least gives a bit more visual variety, a bit more visual difference. But say the game, it looks, you get bits and pieces that look, so when you zoomed in at particular resolutions, that looks like a bit of Earth to me. That could be, that's like, looks a bit like New Zealand or something, and that's maybe, Italy and Sicily stuck out at the bottom of Europe. Maybe that's, sort of France, the edge corner of France or Spain or something like that. So it does give good looking terrain at particular scales, but when you sort of zoom out and you go on the macro scale, it just looks like what it is, a noise filter. And it makes everything then look, this bit of terrain looks exactly like this bit of terrain. And that's one of the places I would say Dyson Sphere program has really sort of nailed that by having lots of planets and different types of planets. It's a lot more visually interesting just from the get-go. And Satisfactory's solution of having, a bespoke designed map is another great way to go, although that has the limitation of not reducing replayability, in my opinion. But yeah, it would have been good to get... what I would really have loved to have seen is when they were working on the campaign, that would have been a properly hand-designed map, and that it had a story to it. So like you were saying, where... all right, see you later. Thanks for dropping in. So you've been... it's been great to chat to you across the series, and hopefully you come back to my next one. And thanks for the well wishes. I'm not going to, basically, just to confirm, I'm not going to stream tomorrow because, my throat's in agony, to be honest with you. And basically, I'll just take the day off, try to recover a bit. I say it's not a bad cold or anything, and don't feel sorry for me, it's just a cold. But, I'm just not, I don't think I want to do tomorrow. So next week, we'll come back and we'll start the whole trying to do the no spoon run, because it is the only achievement I don't have. Oh, this has got messed up because it's had the cheats switched on, so that's gone a bit weird. But the only ones I've not done are the 2 speedrun ones, so I'll start working on how I'm going to do those, given I'm one of the slowest players you can imagine. But yeah, thanks for joining. I normally would stop, but so I'm not going to stream tomorrow and just finish this off. What was I saying? Yeah, I would have loved to have seen a proper hand-designed, map, proper, this is the campaign map, and it looks like this. And as you say, you could have had something that would be that would kill off the biters. Like, for example, you know, a mother queen or something. And it's just one thing, and it's hidden somewhere on the map, maybe randomly, or maybe, as I say, they design it. There was that scenario, wasn't there, where it was like a city that someone had built, where the idea was it was, you know, a civilization that had fallen to the biters, I think. And you know, you were sort of, you know, recovering it almost as a, you know, as a game map. And that way they could have made it look a bit, you know, more like an actual planet sort of thing, rather than just a random, you know, noise generated thing. It might also have been good if they'd had 2 levels, if I'm honest, of like a macro level of noise applied, so that basically you had this noisiness at this level, but then at a much bigger level it would create, say, a giant sea and a giant continent. But I bet that would have been quite complicated to do. But yeah, anyway, so that's it for this week. I say, if there is any, just, you know, if you're still there, Grim, if there's anything you did want to just see, then, you know, let me know. So you've kind of seen the main things, and eventually the VOD will go up on YouTube. Biotech, like Biter Anthrax at 1 mil, yeah, that you could just launch, or yeah, like sort of, or maybe like a plague or something like that, a virus or something like that you just wipe out all the biters with, maybe something like that. Yeah, that'd be quite cool. But yeah, so I say, this is it for today. I usually stream 3 till 6, but I've prattled on for ages, and I say I'm feeling a bit under weather with a cold, so I won't stream tomorrow. So we'll come back next week with Factorio, where I will start working on doing a no spoon run, which should be interesting. So that's the only achievements I've not got, and it's something very, it's almost the opposite to this, where this is like a long-term, you know, slog. That will be trying to do it quickly, so it's almost like the opposite. So the VOD will go up on eventually in a couple of weeks on my YouTube channel, if you wanted to just check those stats out at the beginning. Right, yeah, so that's it for today. I will be back on Monday, I'm sure, with Dyson Sphere Program, and then back next Friday with Satisfactory, before rolling again on, you know, full schedule Saturday and Sunday next week with about Factorio. Yeah, so thanks for everyone who's joined me and having a good chat. I'll see what I need. Hope think it better try to catch your speed run. So yeah, if you know, don't feel any pressure. It's always very much good if people join me, but I say don't feel you sort of need to. I do this for fun. It's not, you know, it's no pressure in it in any way. Right, yes. So I say thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll catch you in another one. And hope you have a good weekend. Cheers.